Chapter 810. Seeing him like this, Bai Yanjun's eyes showed a look of sympathy. It was not common for a Yama king to show such a look, but Li Yunqin was not in the mood to make fun of him at all. He felt extremely bored. He felt extremely suffocated. Even if the two of them were standing on a huge moon that stretched as far as the eye could see, and there was a vast space around them, Bai Yanjun guessed what he was thinking and said, "Do you think we feel suffocated because we are surrounded now?" Li Yunqin frowned. "Isn't that so?" As he spoke, he rubbed the ground with his toes. But there was not even a trace of dust on the ground. This confirmed his inference. If this space was open, there should be some dust here. The current situation could only mean that because this place was extremely high, the dust on the ground could not rise. And because the outside was tightly sealed, the dust from the sky could not fall. Therefore, after tens of thousands of years, but now he felt that the history of this world was 50,000 years, was probably not true. The moon was still as smooth as a mirror. He heard the Yama king laugh. "Oh, you think this starry sky is fake? Could it be true?" Li Yunqin suddenly thought of something halfway through his sentence. Not seeing Venus. If this starry sky was really fabricated as he thought, it should not have made such a mistake. There was no problem with some of the less common constellations. Why did Venus miss out? Listen to me carefully. The whole story is very complicated. I didn't tell you in the past because you were unsettled, and I didn't know what kind of person you were. Now that you have become the Grand Supreme, I see that you have not gone crazy in such a situation, so I think it's time to tell you. Bai Yanjun swirled the tip of his tongue around his finger. "Are you ready?" Li Yunqin sighed. "I just felt that I had calmed down a little, and then such a big thing happened again. I don't think I can be a normal person in this life. Go ahead. I'll listen, but don't keep me in suspense. I will really go crazy that way." Bai Yanjun nodded. He curled his finger again, and the long tongue disappeared. Even though she was irritated and curious at the same time, Li Yunqin's eyes widened. "You can retract your tongue? Then why do you keep it in suspense?" Yama King frowned. "Can't you retract your nose and ears when you become the Grand Supreme? Then why are you standing there?" "I'm used to it. It's none of your business. Don't say anything, just listen to me." He angrily rubbed his chest, then realized that he had retracted his tongue. He crossed his arms in front of him and said, "You are not a person of this world, we already know that. Now we also know that the place you came from is similar to this place. That makes things a lot easier. You should be able to understand the concept of the universe." "You mean the immeasurably vast universe that includes countless galaxies, not the universe in the concept of Midland people, right?" Li Yunqin asked. "Exactly." The White Hell Lord thought for a while and said, 2 days ago, I heard you speak in the city of Wei." "That's right. You said that you came from the outer sky, so let's use your words. The outer sky you mentioned is like a universe. There are so many universes in this world, like the gravel on the ground." Li Yunqin thought for a while. "I know you are not a local. Since we are talking, we'd better not use those specious metaphors. If you mean that there are so many universes, you can say as many as the atoms of a human body. Or from a statistical point of view, it is almost infinite. It's simple and clear, and you don't have to think in a roundabout way." Bai Yanjun smiled. "For you, this is what you want. But for me, what I said before is what I want. You have been in this world for more than 10 years, but you still haven't forgotten the past. But do you know how long I have been in this world? On the contrary, talking like before makes me feel very tired. You are a smart person, so use your brain and listen carefully. I will tell you first, there are so many universes in this world, and many of them have different appearances. This appearance refers to the composition of matter, as well as the various laws. But there are also many similar universes. For example, your universe and this universe. At least in the past, the laws were basically the same. This place more than 70,000 years ago was very similar to your world. There were people and animals. That person also established a civilization and even explored space. But in the end, his hometown is on Earth. Is your world also called Earth?" Li Yunqin said in a deep voice, "Yes." Bai Yanjun smiled. This is not strange. That Shenmu said that because of some sort of similarity, mirror image, or special similarity, the appearance of many worlds were very similar. This is not important. It doesn't matter if you don't understand it. Let's just say that in the past, our Earth was similar to yours. We didn't know how big our universe was, and we didn't understand many of its mysteries. We didn't even completely explore the solar system. But later, this universe met another one. That universe's laws are different. As a result, it brought many strange things such as the power we have now. Li Yunxin said in a deep voice, "This kind of power can't be explained by the laws of physics that I know. So that means your world in the past was also honest, following the laws of physics. There was nothing to cultivate, and there was no spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Later, the two universes collided, and the laws penetrated each other, and became like this? There's something about metaphysics. Huh, you've thought it through." Bai Yanjun stared, and a part of his tongue stuck out from his mouth. He said in surprise, "This monarch has really underestimated you." Li Yunxin shook his head. "I've already thought about these things before. It's just that no one confirmed it for me. The technology you left here has almost nothing to do with divine powers, so it can be seen that these things came later." Indeed came later. But there are some details that you don't know. When our Earth was born, the collision between the two universes began. Thus, a big problem arose this Earth's core. Underground, that thing called the Netherworld Mother. Listen to this name. What do you think it is? Just as Li Yunxin was about to speak, Yamajun said, "I don't think you can guess it. This thing is the Earth itself. Do you know? Originally, the Earth was a living thing, or should I say, it had a soul. But this soul, according to Shenmu, only came after the collision. It's called the aftermath of the vibration. After the Earth Mother was born, another thing was born. We called it the ancient god at that time. This thing is the ancestor of all living things on Earth." Li Yunxin sighed. "I guessed it just now." But Bai Yanjun ignored him. This ancient god knew things early and knew that the Netherworld Mother was here. Maybe one day, she would discover his existence and kill him with a raise of her hand. Thus, she tried every possible way to escape from Earth. If it was now, with the divine powers of the ancient god at that time, not to mention escaping from Earth, she could even create another one. But at that time, the collision between this universe and the other universe had already come to an end. So the divine powers brought about weren't strong. Then the ancient god wasn't strong. He thought about it, and felt that he had to find another way. Thus, he created some ancient monsters and called them breeds. In our legends, those ancient monsters were mistaken for gods. But even though those monsters were strong, they only knew how to kill each other, so they didn't solve the ancient gods' worries. Thus the monsters created humans. Humans like us. You know what happened next. Smelting steel and researching technology didn't rely on the weak divine powers at that time. Instead, with the help of science, things started to look better. Right at that moment, the two universes collided again. Using Shenmu's words, once the two universes collided, although they would be separated for a short period of time, they would be in some kind of entangled state. It was only a matter of time before they collided again, and in the end, it would be hard to separate. With this collision, the originally sleeping Mother Earth woke up. We were all afraid that once this Mother Earth woke up, all the ancient gods, breeds, and humans would all be finished. Thus, we used the power of the world and sent many people to Mars to linger on. The one leading them was called Li Zhen. Do you know Li Zhen? Li Yunxin said in a low voice. I heard from the people on Cloud Mountain. From what you said, I guessed that he was a self-sacrificing savior. But he should also have some ruthless methods. Yamajun sighed. You guessed right. There were some who went to Mars, and some who chose another method. That was the so-called Ascension Plan. At that time, it was called transforming humans into energy states and field states. But in today's words, it would be turning them into souls. They turned into souls and felt that they could roam freely in the void of the universe. It should be far more comfortable than going to Mars. But this is a story for the future. I always talk about Shenmu. You don't know that Shenmu was an extremely powerful person at that time, a great scientist. You should be able to understand. At first, he was killed by Li Jun because of a misunderstanding. But later, some people came up with the ascension plan and found his soul and took it away. Actually, these two methods were expedient measures. When he left Earth, one of Li Jun's incarnations died together with the ancient god who refused to let him go. Do you know why? Li Yunqing carefully thought about every word he said, trying to restore the scene at that time in his mind. But he soon realized that no matter how he restored it, it would be very pale and powerless. The survival and escape of an entire civilization seemed to have happened in just a few decades. How many magnificent things had happened during this period, and how many difficult decisions had people made? It was difficult for him to imagine. Therefore, when Bai Yanjun asked him this question, it took him a long time to come back to his senses. I think it's because it was too strong, Li Yunqing said. If Li Jun really thought as I thought, he always felt that he had some responsibility and obligation, and he would definitely feel that it was extremely dangerous to bring such a strong thing, something that was not of his race, with him. If it were me, I would also get rid of it quickly. Bai Yanjun clapped his hands. It's wonderful that you can think like this. What I said before was the past of this world, but what is really related to us now is what will happen in the future. He said that those people escaped to Mars and recuperated, but they did not forget the disaster of the past. So they began to work hard. Since they put their efforts in the same direction, the progress was fast. After hundreds of years of hard work, they actually built a huge interstellar fleet. So they planned to leave the solar system. In fact, this is the credit of those who turned into the field state, which is what we now call the celestial beings. Shenmu among the celestial beings studied some things. He knew that the point of collision between the two universes was here on Earth. The last collision ended, and the next one was coming. This collision would be more violent than the previous one. He predicted that after this collision, the two universes would no longer be separated, but would always merge. You are a smart person. You should know what the law of fusion is. It is not as simple as a supernatural power. Once the law of the universe becomes more and more complete, maybe even the atoms, molecules, and even light that you mentioned will not exist. How can we live? Those Martians were prepared to escape because they knew this. Before they escaped, they had to make some reserves. So they dismantled those planets. In the end, they also extinguished and dismantled the sun. In the meantime, they came to Earth. They first pierced it with a cannon, thinking that they had destroyed the Netherworld Mother, and then they planned to dismantle Earth. But the celestial beings who turned into the field state in the past did not want them to do so. If the Martians wanted to escape, they could escape. But they were already in the form of souls, and they felt that they were not afraid of any changes. So they wanted to leave Earth and make it a monument. Those Martians followed their wishes and only hollowed out the inside. Only the crust was left, and then they used something like ether fog to reassemble the crust into a ball. That ether fog is the weak water you see. They also created the sun and the moon, sowed some seeds, and left some living creatures. It looked full of vitality. Those Martians, although they clamored all day long to go to the Sea of Stars, they were still humans after all, and they also loved home. They were afraid that without the sun on Earth, they would slowly get lost. So they made a cloud mountain. You have made a mess of the cloud mountain, but you do not know what this cloud mountain is really used for. To locate the celestial sphere, and to produce a layer of cover to protect it. Otherwise, if some meteorites flew over, wouldn't the ground be badly damaged? As for the starry sky that you see now, it is not fake, but it is also not real. It is what it used to look like outside, just a projection. They also left the present Dragon Island, Penglai, Ingzhou, and Fanghu. They are used to control the ether fog. They thought that if one day there really was a disaster, the living creatures on the land could be sent inside. When Bai Yanjun said this in one breath, a desolate look appeared on his face. After a while he said again, unexpectedly, those Martians had just left, and the collision came right after. They were really lucky. The celestial beings did not expect this collision to be so violent. It is no longer like before, when the laws slowly and gently changed. If that was really the case, They also had enough time to adapt to the new laws and still live freely, because Shenmue said that this shock wave, which is the spirit, is some universal law of the universe and exists everywhere. The change this time is very thorough. In our eyes, all of a sudden, everything is gone. It is also Shenmue who said that it is not gone, but has become what it should be in the two merged universes. But we can't see it, and we have no way to observe it. It is more like the dark matter in this universe in the past. If not for the fact that they felt something was wrong and ran into the cover outside the celestial sphere in advance, even the celestial beings would be gone. But even so, those celestial beings in the field are not the celestial beings of the past. They were affected by the collision outside and have changed. But inside this celestial sphere, which is the world you and I are in now, because of the protection of the cloud mountain, is still the same as before the collision. You should know that, just like fish can't come to the land, those celestial beings hiding in that layer of cover can no longer come to the world of the celestial sphere. This is against the law, and they will disappear and die. You will know what will happen in the future. Those celestial beings can't leave, so they have to figure out a way themselves. But in fact, the inside of the celestial sphere is also slowly being penetrated by the chaotic universe outside. Just now you sensed that power with your spirit power, didn't you? It is that power that makes the power inside this celestial sphere grow stronger and stronger. This is not a good thing. One day, the cover can't hold it anymore, and this celestial sphere will be swallowed by the chaotic world outside and disappear. In such a world, they want to create bodies that they can possess, because those celestial beings in the so-called star world, which is the cover I mentioned before, are not happy. They used to travel freely, but now they are imprisoned. They have a lot of emotions and desires, but no bodies. Who can imagine this kind of suffering? At first, they also created a group of people similar to the people in Midland today. They asked them to use the power in this celestial sphere to cultivate. Originally, they were about to succeed, but a big disaster happened. He gasped. Li Yunqin finally had time to say, "Is the Netherworld Mother alive again?" Yes. The reason why this Mother Earth is alive is related to you wanting to complete Red Lady's remnant soul. We will talk about this in detail later. I only said that this Mother Earth was alive, and she got angry. She destroyed that world at that time. She almost opened the ether fog that surrounded the celestial sphere and made the land into one piece. But that time, there were some results. At that time, there was also a strong person in that world called Sartan. At that time, Cloud Mountain wasn't called Cloud Mountain, but the Star of the North Star. Zai. The method of cultivation at that time was also different from today. Now we use the power of heaven and earth, but at that time, we used the power in that layer of cover. We called that cover the magic net. But in fact, they are all things that never deviate from the original. I also know that Ingjuran, the emperor of Rome country that you are supporting, heard a legend. He said that there was an emperor of Rakshasa country called Deathless, who used some method to cultivate godly power with the body of a mortal. Now I will tell you that this is true. It is what happened in the celestial sphere at that time. Speaking of that Sartan, before he was destroyed, he had the power of a grand supreme strong practitioner, and he also understood the things in this world. Thus, he controlled the Cloud Mountain on behalf of the Celestials, and sent a distress message to the Martians who had left long ago. Then, Li Zheng came. Using the aftershock of the shock, he came here in the state of his soul. He ran down to the ground and restrained the Netherworld Mother. Speaking of this, you should be able to think of what happened next. Bai Yanjun sighed. I have witnessed so many things, Sai. Now there should finally be an outcome. After a full 10 breaths of time, Li Yunqin finally ended the storm-like thoughts in his mind. What Bai Yanjun said contained too much information. He wanted to know what the great calamity was, but he did not expect that there would be so many changes. He took a deep breath and said, "Let me summarize my opinion. If there is anything wrong, point it out to me." Yama Jun sighed and said, "You are indeed a smart person. I thought you would have to think for a few days, but it is so fast. Say it." Li Yunqin opened his mouth. So this world was originally the same as the world I came from. But then there was a calamity. This calamity means that it collided with another universe, with a completely different physical law. And the so-called law in that universe is the cultivation and supernatural power in this world. I will call that world the world of immortals. They collided and exchanged some things. As a result, some supernatural powers and supernatural abilities appeared in this world. For example, it could make plants and even benches and tables become spirits. But in the past, this change was not too strong. So at that time, the Netherworld Mother and the ancient gods were not strong. Bai Yanjun nodded and said yes. After this collision, some of the people on Earth ran to Mars to avoid the living Earth. The other part used these changed laws and turned themselves into a field state. This is the shock wave that Shenmu mentioned, and it is also what we call the divine soul today. Then, Shenmu knew that the next collision was coming. So those people on Mars dismantled the solar system, created the celestial sphere we are in today, and ran away. But those who used to be in the field state, which is today's celestial beings, felt that they would not have any problems, so they did not leave. In the end, the second collision was so thorough that almost all the laws of this universe changed. For example, if electrons did not exist in my original world, there would not be any atoms or molecules, and everything in the world would not exist. So your universe, in a sense, was destroyed. But before the Martians left, they created the celestial sphere and left a protective shield. And those celestial beings hid in the protective shield to live. Speaking of which, is that protective shield an energy field, or something else? Bai Yanjun thought for a while and mentioned the name again. Shenmu said that this protective shield is not the layer we think it is. Instead, it is like a space or a layer of small universe. It is actually very big inside, with infinite boundaries. Just like how you can use the aura of the netherworld to isolate spiritual energy, it is completely different from the outside world of chaos. So it isolates the inside from the outside. Oh, I see. For example, it is like a protective layer of vacuum. The inside of the celestial sphere is clean air, while the outside is dirty air. The celestial beings are hiding there. Li Yunxin thought for a while and said, I see. But Bai Yanjun said again, the outside universe is not completely destroyed. Shenmu said that the laws of the two universes merge at the speed of light. With this celestial sphere as the center, it spreads in all directions. Right now, we are like a tiny bubble in the middle of a vast ocean of chaos, struggling to survive. Li Yunxin frowned and thought for a while. I see. That is to say, those Martians have indeed escaped. But they still have to escape for a moment. Only in this way can they avoid the erosion of the universe by the chaos behind them. Then they can only wait for the end of the world while fleeing. That's why they can't come back to rescue them. It's already very difficult to send a few people's souls over. Bai Yanjun sighed. That should be it. Li Yunqing grunted. That is to say, the outermost layer of our current world is a chaotic world, whose laws are unknown, and almost nothing exists. The middle layer, the protective layer created by Cloud Mountain, is also the astral world where the celestial beings live. I just wanted to use my divine sense to explore the outside. The terrible aura I felt is the aura of that chaotic world. According to what you said, the protective layer can't completely isolate this aura, and it is still slowly penetrating. So the spiritual energy between heaven and earth is getting stronger and stronger, and the world is now full of monsters and cultivators. And those celestial beings, during the last impact, were greatly affected by the chaotic world. So some of the laws that make up their bodies are different from the world inside the heavenly sphere. So they can't directly descend here, they have to find a way. So according to some of the laws of the chaotic world outside, they created a cultivation method and passed it to the people in the heavenly sphere to let them cultivate. At first, they almost succeeded, but Mother Earth resurrected and destroyed the world. Later, Li Zhen rushed over and restrained Mother Earth, so they could try again in this world. And this world today, with the Daotong and Kinzo of Xianmen. And those people cultivate, to slowly cultivate their bodies into a shell for the celestial beings to descend. They also cultivate their own intelligence, so as not to cause interference. The so-called Saint Ascends is just being carried out and slaughtered. Bai Yanjun seemed to have thought of something, and only laughed weirdly. Exactly. In that case, why do the Celestials want a shell and want to come to this world? Li Yunqin let out a long sigh. Now I know the so-called calamity should be the fate of this world being swallowed by the chaotic world outside. But why do they want to come to the ground? Yamajun laughed. Don't you know? Of course it's for Cloud Mountain. Since this Cloud Mountain can create that layer of protection, it can also create a stronger and smaller one for itself. Those people want a shell and want to drive Cloud Mountain away, to go outside and escape like those Martians back then. If they escape far away, they can live for many years. They originally thought that since the Celestials came to this world, they could leave together. But Li Zhan wanted them to bring the people of this world with them. In that case, they had to wait for him to subdue Mother Earth before doing this. But what do those Celestials on Cloud Mountain think of the people on this land? They were all clones at the start, so why bother with them? Since Li Zhen didn't allow it, and was locked in battle with Mother Earth a few days ago, they might as well leave first. They didn't even care about the other Celestials who hadn't descended to this world yet. Once they leave, the protective layer will be gone. The rest will die. But luckily, Shenmu had secretly descended to this world and tampered with Cloud Mountain. Those idiots didn't know what to do and could only drag it on. But they also did evil things and sealed the news of their compatriots in the Star World. They were really stupid and evil. They were scared out of their wits. So they could only use some stupid methods, create a Freemasonry and slowly destroy Daotong, so that Cloud Mountain would completely fall into their control. When Bai Yanjun said this, he laughed loudly. He. They felt that these natives of the land weren't worth saving. But they fell to the point where they had to fear Daotong, which was formed by these natives. They had to use such methods to do things secretly, and even proudly call themselves gods. This monarch is going to die of laughter. Did you subdue that Xiexing? Well done. Now those idiots on Cloud Mountain thought that they had fixed it, but they didn't know that it was just superficial work. That Xiexing really knew some methods, but he was subdued by you. Ha ha ha. Wonderful. Li Yunxin's expression became solemn. So, the things I did in the world previously, all kinds of fighting and killing, are useless. Bai Yanjun immediately stopped smiling and said solemnly, Wrong. What you did on the land previously is the most useful. Li Yunxin smiled helplessly. Why? Using my Grand Supreme Realm to blast open the chaotic world outside. Yamajun raised his eyebrows and shouted sternly, Hey! Haven't you thought about how we can avoid this great calamity and escape with everyone? Li Yunxin shook his head. Use Cloud Mountain? That's not realistic. Back then, the Martians built a fleet and had to dismantle the entire solar system as reserves before they dared to escape. When Grandmaster D and the others arrived at Cloud Mountain, they only wanted to escape by themselves. I can understand that. They were afraid that there wouldn't be enough resources. I think they were worried about the truth. Only using Cloud Mountain to escape would definitely not be able to bring so many people away. What do Li Zhan and Chen Zhao want to do? Destroy Mother Earth, create an industrial civilization in this world, and create a bunch of starships to escape? I don't know if there's enough time, but I know that there definitely isn't enough resources. There are more than 1 billion people here. Yamajun said solemnly. In the past, Li Zhen did think that way. That's why he let those Celestials graze the people. He wanted those remnant souls to replenish his strength, and also wanted the Celestials to come to the world. But after knowing what the Celestials have done over the years, his thoughts have changed. Now he thought of another way. His smile suddenly became strange. Do you know where your father Li Chunfeng is now? Li Yunxin was stunned. Why ask him? Bring him to the netherworld. Bai Yanjun stared at him. That person is quite remarkable. I don't know how he managed to get into a conversation with Chen Zhao. He said that he had a good idea. Chen Zhao didn't tell me clearly. He only told me to find him. But I can't find him. This person seems to be outside the 3 realms. Since Chen Zhao said that he might be useful, I believe him. I'm meeting you for this matter to find him. Li Yunxin thought for a while. You came here this time to tell me that I'm extremely important. Did Li Chunfeng say that? Yes. Okay, Li Yunxin said. He's one of the things I want to settle before going to the netherworld. *****. Note 1. For more information, see the work of the famous online author, Demigod, Alien 1 Starship Era. *********** Demigod, Alien 1, Starship Era Mars Calendar Year 624, Lunar Orbit, B-232 Space Station. Chu Yuanhang was looking at its corpse. It had become bigger, but it was already dead. It was being cut. The huge interstellar battleship blocked the sun's light and was completing the final decomposition work. Earth, or Gaia, finally died in the hands of human civilization. Chu Yuanhang found it hard to imagine that era, the era 600 years ago. Humans were helpless against it. But then he laughed at his own childish thoughts. Perhaps in another 600 years, the humans of that time would find it hard to imagine the situation today. In order to leave the solar system forever, the human starship civilization had to do so much preparation work and store so many resources, and could not directly absorb energy from the void. Yes, he first dismantled Pluto, then Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars. There was a delay in dismantling Mars, because historians believed that as the second home of human civilization, this planet, as well as Earth, should be preserved. But cosmic biologists had a different opinion. They believed that in the future interstellar journeys, they might encounter other life forms like Earth. In order to be fully prepared, they should learn more about this unimaginably huge life form, instead of leaving it alone in the solar system. That would be a crime against humanity. Moreover, even if Mars and Earth were preserved, Venus and Mercury, as important strategic resources, also had to be dismantled. At that time, there would only be 2 planets left in the solar system, and the gravitational circle would inevitably be disturbed. The same inevitable result was that Earth and Mars would slowly leave their current orbits and be thrown out of the solar system, becoming wandering planets for a long time. There was no way to keep it as a memento, so Mars was also dismantled. Then Earth. After a final observation and study, the secondary main cannon of the infinite deep space interstellar battleship fired, penetrating the core of Earth from 300,000 kilometers away and completely destroying it. That was a year ago. By now, the recovery work was nearing completion, and the core was hollowed out. But it was said that because of the instructions of a big shot, the remaining crust was preserved. Because this planet was not just the home planet of human starship civilization. Chu Yuanheng knew that there were other people, existing in a completely different and unimaginable way. In fact, it was not accurate to call them people, because they were in a field state. They would randomly appear in a corner of the solar system like quantum ghosts, but according to probability statistics, most of the time, they would gather near the orbit of the moon. Sometimes, Chu Yuanhang would feel an inexplicable chill. He was not sure if such an existence had come to his side, but he heard that the big shot had reached some kind of agreement with those people. They did not stop the dismantling of Earth. Perhaps the Earth's crust was left for them. Chu Yuanhang thought in his heart. The remnants of the Earth would be pieced together again, pieced together into a ball. It looked like the Earth before it was destroyed, but it was hollow inside. Chu Yuanhang personally thought that it was meaningless and a waste of resources. But he had to admit that the Earth that was pieced together was beautiful. Oh, it should be called Earth Monument now. In fact, it was more like a specimen of the once living Earth. The continent was what it looked like in the past. The ocean of the past was replaced by a layer of fog. But it was not fog, but a kind of ether fog that could produce a strong gravitational effect. It would gather the crust together like glue and become the ocean of that new world. So it was still blue and brown like a big marble. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Chapter 8:11. After saying that, he fell silent for a moment. Too many things like destruction and salvation made his heart feel heavy. He originally just wanted to understand the truth of this world and what the so-called catastrophe was. He liked excitement and novelty, and he also liked to pursue mysteries that required some effort to solve. Perhaps he was like a cat. When he was curious about something, He always felt 100 cat claws scratching his heart, and he had to figure it out. However, in the past, he didn't really like to take responsibility. He thought that perhaps the catastrophe was terrifying, but it should be handled by someone else, such as someone like Chen Zhao, who had the world in his heart. And he could watch from the side, or occasionally help out. In the end, everything would be resolved perfectly. He watched the show and felt that it was indeed exciting, but he didn't expect the catastrophe to be like this. There were a lot of things that weighed heavily on his heart, pressing down on it as well. Only then did he realize that what Bai Yanjun said, "I'll tell you everything when you reach the Grand Supreme and settle down." This was true. In the past, after hearing these things, he might have run away, or gone to find Grandpa D. But now there was something else in his heart other than himself. In a sense, he was coerced. What was worse was that the person who coerced him was none other than himself. He had ways to get himself out of this coercion, but he clearly knew that once he did that, he would fall into terrible loneliness again, compared to the responsibility that he was about to bear, which was more painful. That is one of the other sorrows of life. Choice. Li Yunqin let out a sigh and slowly walked forward. Bai Yanjun didn't know what he was thinking, but he walked with him without saying a word. The two walked until they reached the edge of the moon. Then, Li Yunqin took a step forward and fell straight down. He didn't use any magical power, nor did he use any magic to lighten his body. He just fell like a stone. The howling wind quickly poured into his ears, but he opened his eyes and stared at the ground slowly falling toward him. The White Hell Lord also fell to the ground with him. He just got close to his face and stared with a pair of white eyes. "What are you doing? Seeking death? With your current body, you won't die from falling like this." After a while, Li Yunqin finally said, "My heart is tired. I just don't want to use any tricks." Hearing this, Bai Yanjun didn't say anything. Gradually, Li Yunqin was able to see the appearance of the vast midland under her feet. The mountains, rivers, forests, and plains became larger and larger. At first they looked like miniature models, and then they looked like fake mountains and streams. Listening to Bai Yanjun talking about the past on the moon, he felt a great sense of powerlessness in his heart. The whole spherical sphere was under his feet, and he could see it clearly. This made it seem extremely small and unreal. Coupled with those stories, it was as if everything in front of him was fake, as if everything in this world had become insignificant. But now, everything in this world was gradually unfolding before his eyes. Reality became grander, and the stories he heard gradually faded away, as if they had become mere stories. Li Yunqin suddenly stopped in the air, identified the direction of Dongting, and flew over. Finally, he landed on the ground again, landing beside the stone where he met Bai Yanjun before. He walked back and forth by the lake for a few steps before Bai Yanjun arrived. He stared at him and asked, "I'm worried about you. What do you think now?" After a while, Li Yunqin shook his head. "How do I know? Listening to your stories, I felt that nothing was real except us. I felt that living here for more than 10 years was like living in a game. Everything I did was meaningless. But now I'm back to the ground. I know that I'm still stepping on the earth, and those people in the city are real people. So I feel that what you said is not true. Alas, don't disturb me. I told you to think about it." Bai Yanjun narrowed his eyes, as if he wanted to laugh at him. But in the end, he took back his words and stuck his tongue out again. Looking around, he walked into Dongting, and took a walk on the water. After a quarter of an hour, Dongting slowly became foggy. Then he heard Li Yunqin said, "Tell me about Red Lady's soul." Yama Jun flew back to him. "Have you figured it out?" "Probably." Li Yunqin curled his lips. "I think I fell into your trap. I became that kind of person. I heard a story about someone who got rich overnight, or saw a group of handsome men and beautiful women living a luxurious life on TV. My consciousness suddenly went away, and my ambition also became lofty. I began to think about what would happen if I became rich in the future. For a moment, I feel that all these things around me are insignificant, just some small things. But when I came back to my senses from the fantasy, I still had to face a lot of things to worry about. I still had to go to work, and I still had to be scolded. I still had to be entangled in a bunch of mundane things and couldn't jump out. Like me before. I thought the world was going to end, and everything was meaningless. But I just realized, even if it was going to end, it would still take tens of thousands of years. The history of human civilization in my previous world was only about 10,000 years. I can't just give up everything for such a long period of time. Bai Yanjun clapped his hands. We really didn't misjudge you. You convinced yourself in a short time. You are a devil man after all. Li Yunqin spread his hands. Then tell me. You said that what you said before was related to the completion of Red Lady's soul. What does it have to do with her? This Yama Jun rolled his eyes and said, well, it's a bit troublesome to talk about it. I can't explain it clearly. It's better to find someone else to talk to you. Li Yunqin was stunned. Who? Yama Jun laughed strangely. Who? Anyway, it's not Chen Zhao. You have to go to the netherworld to see her. It's Shen Mu. Li Yunqin thought for a moment. You said that the scientist in your world predicted the collision. And he created the art of painting in this world and passed it to Chen Zhao. That's him. But when you talk to him, you have to control your temper. Yama Jun said. That person's temper is not very good. Li Yunqin said. Oh. Bai Yanjun didn't know what he meant by, oh. So he hesitated for a while and said, hey, fine. I'll call him now. But we don't have much time, you two, don't be awkward. It's not easy for us to come to the netherworld. If he's really angry and refuses to talk, you have to wait for a while. Li Yunqin said again, oh. Yama Jun rolled his eyes. It was not clear whether he was rolling his eyes or not. Because his eyes were white, he closed his eyes and muttered something to himself. Then he drew a line in the air and opened a door in the void. A figure immediately appeared in front of the two. It was indeed a shadow. They could see its face clearly, but it wasn't very stable. Occasionally it would flicker slightly. It was Shen Mu. As soon as the figure appeared, he stared at Li Yunqin rudely and didn't say anything. Li Yunqin also remained silent and stared at the shadow. After 3 breaths of time, the White Hell Lord panicked. Old Shen. Only then did Shen Mu speak. He spoke very quickly and seriously, as if he was talking to a student. I heard that you want to save your wife and need my help, right? Li Yunqin glared at Bai Yanjun. The White Hell King turned his face away and took a few steps away. Shen Mu didn't give them any time to react. He immediately said, it's good that you know you're wrong and can change. Don't be a heartless man. I heard that your wife was very good to you and died for you. Young man, you regret it, right? My wife was also very good to me in the past, but I didn't know how to cherish her. I don't want to see juniors like you follow my path, so I'll help you. But I have to say this first. My wife is still in the astral plane. In the end, you have to help me save her. Alright, let's talk business. How do you understand time? Bai Yanjun said that he had a bad temper, but Li Yunqin didn't expect it to be this bad. He was actually the kind of person who was immersed in his own world and was slow to react to other people's emotions. This kind of person, he didn't feel annoyed. He thought he was the kind of person who was arrogant and overbearing. His expression relaxed a little. Shen Mu didn't talk nonsense, which was to his liking. He said, I didn't think about it deeply. I don't want to show off in front of Teacher Shen. I heard from Teacher Shen. Shen Mu seemed to be very happy, but his words weren't pleasant to hear. It's normal. You can't understand it more thoroughly than me. Let's put it this way. You people think that time is linear, that it's either the future or the past. You want to save your wife because you want to make up for her aftershock. Do you know what aftershock is? Li Yunqin said soul. Very careless. Shen Mu frowned. Aftershock is like this. The universe that we collided with is a relatively chaotic universe, and many things in it are messed up. When the two worlds collided, there was a shock on the level of time, space, and law. So it spread in the form of the law of causality in our universe, creating aftershock. The law of causality. Do you know what the law of causality is? This time, Li Yunqin didn't say anything. Sure enough, Shen Mu also didn't want to hear him say. The law of causality is actually a kind of description of the scattering nature of time. The scattering nature of time is easy to understand, right? It's like a light source that radiates light in all directions, but it's not just two in front and one behind, but countless in all directions. Now that it's changed, the past will also change. It's equivalent to the entire universe rewriting everything that happened in the past, future, or whatever. This isn't hard to understand, right? If you don't understand, just say it. Otherwise, you won't understand what I'm going to say next. It was rare for him to stop and give Li Yunqin 2 seconds to think. Li Yunqin immediately said, "You mean, Red Lady's soul fragment doesn't just exist in the past. It exists somewhere else, or the direction of time. Other than the two directions we know, the future and the past, there are other directions? There are also fragments of her soul in those directions? But that kind of concept is not something we can understand? Something like a parallel space?" Shenmu blinked. "What was your major in the past?" Li Yunqin was stunned for a moment before answering. "Bachelor of Law. Master of Psychology." "What a pity. With your ability to understand things, you shouldn't learn those useless things." Shenmu sighed very quickly. "Otherwise, you wouldn't have asked questions like whether it's a parallel space. I'm telling you it's not. Don't try to use something in your head to compare the scattering nature of time to other directions of time. This kind of thing can't be understood by people like us who live in three-dimensional space. It's like a two-dimensional creature can't understand height. It's simply a joke to use length to describe the nature of height. Only through mathematical means can we get the result. But it's also not understandable. For example, can you imagine what the concept of one looks like and what color it is?" "I understand," Li Yunqin said. "Teacher Shen, please continue." "There's nothing to continue," Shenmu said. "I said that the aftershocks of the shock spread throughout the universe in the way of the law of cause and effect. This aftershock is the soul. I'll give you an easy-to-understand example. For example, before the two of us spoke, there was nothing like psychic power in this world. But now when we said this, the collision began. So the aftershocks and chaotic laws instantly spread to all levels of time, in the way of the law of cause and effect. Then tell me, at what time will something like a psychic power be produced?" Li Yunqin thought for a second. "At the level of time that we can't understand, a psychic power will be produced. At the level of time that we can understand, a psychic power will also be produced. In other words, when the collision occurs in the present, not only will a psychic power be produced in the future, but also in the timeline before the collision, the past." Shenmu clapped his hands. "It's enough to understand to this extent. In the words of ordinary people, the past has also been rewritten. But it's impossible for anyone to realize this. You're much smarter than those people down there. They said that the collision happened when the Earth was born. But in fact, because it happened in my era, it also happened in the past. The whole world has been rewritten. But it's not their fault. They're all mortals." Li Yunqin took the opportunity and said, "Then what you said about the law of cause and effect, the fate and ties that I feel in this world, the things that can't be explained in the linear way of time, is one of the manifestations of time in other directions? You're a smart person. Well, now you understand. It's impossible to resurrect your wife in her original state. She'll still be missing a lot of things. But you don't have to worry about that. The things that are missing won't affect her. In your words, you can't see any fate on her anymore. And you can't predict her future, because the things that exist in other directions of time have disappeared." Shenmu turned his head to look at something. It should be something beside him in the netherworld. Then he turned back and said, "Go save your wife. Remember what I told you to do. I'll see you down there." After saying these words, his figure flickered and he turned around, turning his head back. But before he was about to disappear, he thought of something and hurriedly turned his head to say, "You can't be a negative." Li Yunqin shrugged. He stood there thinking for a while before looking at Bai Yanjun. "Wife? Chapter 8:12. Yamajun seemed to roll his eyes. "You still don't appreciate it?" What Shenmu cared about the most was his knowledge, and what he cared about next was his wife. His wife was also in the star realm, with those celestials. If I didn't say that you wanted to save your wife, he wouldn't care about these things. Do you know that he would fly into a rage if anyone wasted 2 minutes of his time down there? After saying this, he laughed again. But you, this little fellow, really know how to say things when you see someone, and say things when you see a ghost. You can actually make Shenmue like you, just by saying a few words. Li Yunxin touched his face. Like me? How can you tell? He didn't point at your nose and scold you. Bai Yanjun stared at him. You didn't see him scolding Li Zhen when he first arrived in the netherworld. Li Zhen killed him. Li Yunxin thought for a moment. But he wants me to save his wife. How? And find his wife the body of a Grand Supreme? Bai Yanjun spread his hands. How would I know? But Shenmue didn't tell me how to save her. Li Yunxin frowned. You should ask him. Hey, he doesn't care about these small things. Li Yunxin was stunned. Small things? Didn't you say that apart from his knowledge, what he cares about most is his wife? Yamajun laughed. Saving his wife, and how to save his wife are two different things for him. Saving her is a big thing, but thinking of a way is a small thing. Do you understand him now? Li Yunxin sighed. Oh, just like those F*King leaders. As long as the result. I'll go back after you finish your business here. Yamajun looked at him. This time I'm free, so I came out. What I said to you, you have to take it to heart. Don't stay too long on the land. If you want to end your karma, then come to the bottom. Don't let me down. Li Yunxin said. It depends on my mood. Yamajun laughed. I was afraid that you wouldn't be obedient, so I left some things unsaid. Do you want to know? How did you get to the Grand Supreme Realm? What is that black seed in your body? Li Yunxin thought for a moment before he remembered the term black race. When they were in the secret chamber of Yunshan, Grandpa D had told him that the reason why demons could communicate and have intelligence was because of the gray seed in their bodies. He also said that he was also a gray seed in his body. He told Li Yunxin to eat something that could turn the gray seed into a black seed and give him greater power. However, at that time, Li Yunxin realized that the seemingly omnipotent Grandmaster D actually did not know that the so-called devil seed in his body was not gray but black. These things used to be called magic seeds. Note 1. But there were very few people who mentioned this matter, and there were no other important matters related to it in the future, so he just noted it down. Now that he heard Bai Yanjun say this, his eyes widened. You know that the thing inside my body is the black race? In the past, he did not understand the truth of this world, so he felt that there was nothing wrong with the gray and black races. After all, this was a world with supernatural powers and magic. These things sounded mysterious, but it was not a big deal. But now that he knew a lot of the past, he knew that the so-called supernatural powers were just another form of expression. And in essence, it was no different from the internal combustion engine driving a car. When he thought about the gray and black races again, he felt that he could not figure them out. What was the thing that Grandpa D made him eat in the past? Bai Yanjun smiled mysteriously. You are not from this world, so naturally, you are a black race. Well, Li Yunxin see you down there. After saying this, his figure disappeared. Li Yunxin only had time to say, you again. Doing this kind of thing. Damn it, crazy. Fortunately, he had such a long tongue. Didn't they say that gossipy women like to talk? But he only said half of what he wanted to say, and it made people's hearts itch. He snorted and sat back on the big green rock. It was already late at night. The stars were shining in the sky, and the bright moon hung high. But when Li Yunxin looked at the starry sky now, he did not feel that the world was vast. He knew that the starry sky was just a projection of the previous world. It should have been after the Martians left here. Bai Yanjun said that the erosion outside spread at the speed of light. He did not know if he was right. If that was the case, the so-called destructive chaotic world only occupied a very small area in this entire universe. It could even be ignored. 70,000 years. He remembered that the nearest star system to the solar system was about 40,000 light years. This meant that the chaotic world had only devoured 2 star systems. If it was not for being in such a bubble, it could actually live freely for a long time. If it kept moving at the speed of light, it could even live for another tens of billions of years. Xiexing said that for their escaped civilization, resources were no longer the biggest bottleneck, but a condition. This should mean that they had developed to a certain extent, And maybe there would be a way to solve the problems of their world. He also had his own problems to solve. Li Yunqin sat quietly for a moment, then stood up. He had already picked up the soul fragments of Red Lady from the two timelines, past and future, and had already pieced them together. Now what was missing was to create a body for her. According to Shen Mu, such a Red Lady was still not complete, but what was lost was only the river of fate that could be observed, or the fruit of fate between the two of them. In fact, this was not necessarily a bad thing. Whether it was family, friends, or other relationships, it was not a good thing to know all the secrets of another person. Knowing everything could indeed prevent betrayal and harm, but it would also lose a lot of surprises and novelty. He had not been a Grand Supreme for long, but he had already developed the habit. When he met someone, he would look at the river of fate. He would see what would happen once he got entangled with them, and then decide whether or not to have a relationship with those people. But if he did the same to those close to him, the result would probably be a headache. It was impossible to end things with those people, but he already knew that there might be trouble that could not be avoided. This was the real feeling of powerlessness. It was better to not see anything at all, and have peace and quiet with both eyes. Now he only needed a body. Li Yunqin closed his eyes, and began to slowly recall the appearance of Red Lady. But soon he realized, he couldn't see her clearly. He knew what she looked like from a distance, and he knew what her every frown and smile looked like. He even saw her naked body. That was in Dongting, when the Lord Dongting refined the dragon soul into her body, and threw her to him. But he couldn't remember more details, because he had never looked at her carefully. He could only sigh softly, and look at the soul of Red Lady in his sleeve with his spiritual mind. The female monster was sleeping in the void. In terms of appearance, she was actually one of the most outstanding figures in the world. The most beautiful woman Li Yunqin had ever seen was the Taoist of Qingshui Road. But she was so beautiful that ordinary people would feel helpless at first sight of her. Compared to her, Red Madam's beauty was more lively and fragrant. It was a kind of beauty that could be touched and appreciated. She was sleeping, but her eyelashes trembled slightly like the fluttering wings of a butterfly. This was because she was now taken in by Li Yunqin, with his supernatural power, and her vital energy was also flowing with his. When Wacken and the power of the netherworld collided, she couldn't sleep well. Li Yunqin's eyes stayed on her face for a while, looking at her eyebrows and imagining her eyes. He saw her nose, lips, and chin. Then he saw her neck, collarbone, and chest. From the back to her waist, legs, and even her toes. In his eyes, the clothes that could cover the graceful body of the female monster's soul lost their function. He could see everything clearly. He remembered the bulging curve, the sudden turn, and the round and slender direction. The body condensed by wishes and monster power was almost perfect. He didn't need to pay extra attention to any flaws. There was not even a fine line or a light spot. In the glimmer of his spiritual mind, her body glowed as if it was carved out of jade. It was the first time he looked at her so carefully. He realized that at this moment, when the female monster withdrew all her supernatural power, and was no longer filled with powerful monster power, she looked very helpless and fragile, just like an ordinary woman in the human world. He also knew that the process of putting all his attention on this body, carefully observing every detail, deeply engraving it in his consciousness, and then using this memory to reconstruct her body, for her was actually planting some kind of indescribable hint or guidance for him. But as soon as this idea came to his mind, he thought again. What kind of trust and persistence did she need to offer her loyalty and life to him without reservation, and without hesitation? He had never experienced this kind of feeling. He wanted to know, but he was afraid to know what kind of experience it was. So Li Yunqin sighed softly. He realized that maybe he owed her too much. After staying for a moment, he withdrew his gaze. He decided to reconstruct Red Lady's body, which was at the peak of the profound realm. For him, who was now in the Grand Supreme realm, this was not a difficult thing. He had thought about it for a long time. In the future, if he wanted to resurrect Lu Gongzan and the ninth young master, he would use the same method. The method of painting could turn illusions into reality. But he already knew that if there was no core, the reality created would only have the appearance. and it would be difficult for it to have powerful supernatural power. Just like when he reconstructed the body of the ninth young master, he needed that core. This core could be used as a part of his body. He subconsciously raised his hand and touched his ribs. But soon he put it down, smiled, and pulled out a strand of hair. Then, he first connected the aura of Red Lady's soul with this strand of hair. He first guided the aura of the hair, and then focused on the female monster's soul. Then he was stunned, the soul was gone. This made his heart cold, and the strand of hair in his hand fell to the ground. But once the aura between him and the hair was cut off, the female monster's soul could be examined by him again. She was still sleeping, her eyelashes trembling slightly. Li Yunxin took a deep breath and frowned. But soon he thought of what Shenmu had said before. He completed the Banshee's soul from 2 timelines, and created a seemingly perfect one. But in fact many things were lost. The things that were lost were the so-called fruits of fate, of the cultivators and demons in this world. But what did this have to do with the disappearance of the soul? If an ordinary person were to think about these things, it would take them a long time. But he remembered many things clearly, and listed them clearly in his mind. So he calmed himself down, and tried to find the answer from his memories. Bai Yanjun was in a hurry to ask him to do something. He should also know that he wanted to settle the matter of Red Lady. If this method, the most likely method he could think of, was not feasible, with the clever mind of the Yama King, he should have told him and pointed out a clear path. This meant that the answer to the mystery should be in the dragons. Li Yunxin relaxed his brows and realized this. He was present during the first battle between Ling Kongzi and the ninth young master in the city of Wei. That day, Ling Kongzi took out many magic weapons and wanted to imprison the ninth young master, who had revealed his demon body. But the demon saw the prohibition as nothing and was not affected at all. According to him, the dragons did not have any fruits of fate, so they were not afraid of the Xianmen prohibition. He did not think about it at that time, and he did not think about it after, because he thought it was some unfathomable law between heaven and earth. Later on, when he learned about the origin of the so-called dragons, he gradually understood. According to Shenmu, all living beings between heaven and earth, including the souls of those dead things, were the shockwaves produced by the collision of 2 universes. But the dragons were not born, they were created. If so, there should be no river of fate. Since there was no such thing, there was no fruit of fate. In a sense, they were independent of some of the laws of this world. If Li Yunxin used the same method to reconstruct the bodies of the dragons, he should be able to achieve it. But the spirit of Red Madam, although there was no fruit of fate, it was the shockwaves of the real thing. This was the difference between the two. Maybe it was because the bodies of the dragons created by humans could not withstand the real shockwaves. There was no way to make the bodies with supernatural powers that he created match the shockwaves. Until now, he had only changed bodies for 3 people: Lu Gongzan, the ninth young master, and the Taoist of Qingshui Road. The latter 2 were created by the art saint, while Lu Gongzan used the same method to seize the emptiness of hatred. His spirit was not damaged, and was preserved by him. Was the difference between him and Red Madam because of whether her spirit was preserved or not? Li Yunxin sighed softly, and sat back on the big rock. There should be an answer to all these questions. If he understood enough, he would definitely be able to solve them. The art Tao was created by Shenmu for him. If he asked Shenmu, he should be able to get a detailed answer. When he first came into contact with the matters of cultivation, he felt that there was no need for ethereal metaphysics. It was all about experience. But after understanding more, he realized that there was also an extremely exquisite and internally consistent law. For example, like many cultivators in the world, he only had a rough understanding. If he did things according to the rough, he might indeed make mistakes and not be able to figure it out. Just like in his previous world, in order to produce certain substances in experiments, he had to strictly control the temperature. If he did not understand the mechanism behind it, it would be difficult to explain why people think that the temperature is about the same. Why did it succeed once and fail the next time? However, if this method did not work, there was actually another way. He used the art Tao to cast the supernatural powers to reconstruct the body, so that she would have great power when she was resurrected. But if without this power, he could only create a body for her. But that would mean that she would be in existence similar to a mortal. Chapter 8:13. Does she like to be immortal? Does she want power? What does she want to do most? What is she like? What does she hate? What does she dream? He finds that he doesn't know. Li Yunxin sits alone on the bluestone for an hour, like a silent statue. The dew of the night and the mist of Dongting wet his hair and clothes, making his face look like it is also covered with mist. So when the moon is in the middle of the sky, he finally whispers, "Mountain." The thick mist above Dongting is suddenly dispelled, and the clear moonlight shines down. There is neither vibration nor loud noise. However, at the place where Mount June has collapsed in half, suddenly a mountain grows. The water in Dongting is surging, but it is also silent. Some kind of indescribable powerful force suppresses all the noise. It seems that the owner of the force doesn't want them to affect his state of mind. The new mountain is uprooted from Mount June, like a giant bamboo shoot straight to the sky. Grass and trees on this mountain wither, and flowers bloom and fall. It seems that thousands of years have passed in the blink of an eye. After 6 breaths, the growth of the mountain stops. It stands majestically in the lake, and the top has been surrounded by clouds and mist. Li Yunxin slowly raises his hand and gently grabs it. He whispers, "The essence of jade is the bone." A cloud of dust suddenly rises on the mountain and begins to fall slowly. But the fog is not fog, but the earth and stones that originally covered the mountain. Because this mountain is so high and lonely, the earth and stones seem to fall very slowly, as if it is slowly removing the dust on it. When the earth and stones fall, the true appearance of the mountain is revealed. Its entire body was sparkling and warm. It is bathed in the moonlight and reflects the moonlight, reflecting a large area of water around it. It is a jade mountain. It contains the aura of treasure, but the brilliance is restrained, like the king of the mountain. If there is another person here, he should realize that the jade essence of the whole land has been condensed by this mountain when he sees this mountain. From now on, there will be no jade in the world. After Li Yunxin spoke in a low voice, a misty green light appeared in front of his finger. Then he flicks his fingers, and the brilliance transforms into shape. In a thin layer of mist, the shape of a skeleton could be seen. Therefore, the jade mountain standing in the Dongting suddenly lost all its brilliance and became pale and fragile. After another 3 breaths of time, the jade mountain collapsed, turning into a silver mist that shone under the moonlight. When the mist falls into the water of Dongting Lake, which has been dirty because of the catastrophe, becomes clear. When they landed on the shore, they turned into fine white sand. Li Yunxin heaved a sigh of relief. After resting for 2 breaths of time, he opened his mouth and said in a low voice, "Snow." The white sand that fell by the lake, and the silver mist that fell into the lake suddenly turned into ice and snow. Ice and snow covered Dongting in a flash. By the time he exhaled, a bright mirror had already appeared in the 500 kilometers of the world. The ice was extremely cold and clear. Through the ice on the surface of the lake, one could see the bottom of the lake, as if the ice was only an illusion. The snow was also extremely white, without any impurities. The essence of water between heaven and earth was all captured by the divine power into this piece of ice and snow, even making every snowflake and every ice grain faintly glow. Take the essence of ice and snow. Li Yunxin stretched out his hand for the appearance. Then the ice and snow suddenly melted. Besides the jade bones, there were ice muscles, a natural body, and the moonlight gilded her with silver light. Li Yunxin stared at her for a while and waved his hand to make clothes for her. As a result, her neck and face looked even more creamy under the contrast of the red dress. He breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Flowers." In this barren land, peach blossoms suddenly bloomed for 30 miles. The green leaves were green, and the flowers were red. This piece of pink fragrance made the moonlight stained with fragrance, so it became softer. Li Yunxin raised his hand and picked a peach blossom from a cluster of branches in front of him. Then he pinched the peach blossom and gently touched the cheeks of the beauty in front of him. Then her face turned red, and her lips turned pink. And the peach blossoms that were about to bloom for 30 miles also withered at this moment, leaving only a thin shadow. Li Yunxin stood up from the stone and walked down. He looked at her carefully for a while and sighed. "Wake up." About 2 seconds later, Red Lady's eyelashes trembled. Then she opened her eyes, and her chest began to rise and fall slightly. It was still early spring, but she breathed out white mist. She was stunned for a while because of the fusion of the completed soul and body. She stared at Li Yunxin in front of her, and then turned to look at the mist on Dongting, and the peach tree on the shore with only green leaves. After another 2 seconds she said, I repaired your soul and made a new body for you. I created a new body for you, Li Yunxin said. But this way, your spirit will lose its fate with the world, and your demonic power will not be preserved. You are immortal now. If you don't like it, I can help you cultivate. I can help you return to the mysterious realm as soon as possible. Red Lady didn't speak, and tried to walk a few steps. The sole of the embroidered shoe transformed by Li Yunxin rubbed against the white sand, making a rustling sound. The first 2 steps seemed to be a little weak, because her legs and feet were soft. But she adapted quickly. She didn't want to stop as if she had just learned to walk. She walked to the lake first, and touched the lake with the tip of her shoe. Then she walked back, and went around to the peach forest. Then she seemed to be interested in traveling, and walked to the depths of the peach forest. She was no longer a monster, so she couldn't avoid those branches with her supernatural power instinctively. Her clothes were occasionally caught, but she didn't stop. She just struggled hard, and the seemingly thin but extremely tough clothes got rid of the entanglement. Li Yunxin was looking at her, waiting for her to say something. But after waiting for a while, he found that Red Lady's figure had disappeared in the depths of the forest. He was stunned, and then he frowned and followed her. When he walked into the forest, the branches automatically avoided him. So it only took him a few dozen steps to see the former demoness. She didn't look left or right, nor did she stop walking. Her steps were neither too fast nor too slow. Obviously, she had completely adapted to this body. She was hurrying on with her journey, not sightseeing. Li Yunxin caught up with her. He accompanied her and asked in a low voice, "What are you going to do? Where are you going?" Red Lady looked at him from the side. At this time, there was a kind of mortal powerlessness on her face. But on this face, there was no resentment, not even a hint of eagerness. She just smiled and said, "You must have a lot of things to do. I'm leaving." "Where are you going?" Li Yunxin frowned. "Why are you leaving?" This was the second time he had asked this question. Red Lady stopped and looked at him. She carefully looked at his face and gently sighed. "I don't blame you. You fulfilled your promise and called me a new person. You're a new person. I like to be a human. And I like to live a human life. But now that I don't have demonic power and supernatural power, I can't help you, and I'll become a burden. So I'm leaving." "Who said?" Li Yunxin paused and calmed himself down. "I said I could ask you to recultivate. I'm too tired," Red Lady said. Li Yunxin stared at her. He subconsciously tried to explore the river of her fate, but he couldn't see it anymore. From the moment she came back to life, the fruit of fate had been cut off. He couldn't see her anymore. "Well," Li Yunxin sighed again. "You're immortal now. What should I do if you leave? You need to eat, drink, wear clothes and spend money to live in the world. There are no towns nearby except the city of Wei. It's spring now and it's cold at night. Where will you live? What do you live on? If you don't want to recultivate, go to the city of Wei. Pheasant made some over there." Red Lady suddenly raised her hand to fix his collar and stepped back. She looked at him seriously. "I don't want to go to the city of Wei either. It's not good there. I can read, play the zither and write poems. I can go to teach. And then, I can get married." "Get married?" Li Yunxin laughed and then stopped. "Who will you marry? There's no one better than you in the world. But there should be someone who can get by." Red Lady walked forward again. "I know your newly molded body should be immortal. I can look for it slowly. I'll find the right one." The peach forest suddenly changed. The branches withered in an instant, as if they had experienced the baptism of years. Soon they turned into flying ashes. They swirled in the night wind, like a black fog that covered the sky and the sun. Red Lady didn't stop, but she was blinded. She raised her hand to wipe it. Li Yunxin stared at her and waved his hand. The black smoke disappeared without a trace. He followed her and stared at her sideways. If you want to use this method, you can call me. I used to be the obsession of a ghost cultivator and gave you a lot of trouble. Red Lady said softly. I already know. She took another 3 or 4 steps. There's also Bai Yunxin. When we were at sea, I told her that I wouldn't live long. After I die, she'll accompany you. I don't want to break my promise. It's none of my business. Li Yunxin was furious. What do you mean by that? Is this kind of agreement valid without my knowledge? It's invalid. And I gave you this body. You want to get married. I gave you this body. Red Lady stopped and closed her eyes, raising her head. If you want to take it back, then take it back. I don't want to be a puppet. I don't want to live like a dream like before. Li Yunxin immediately raised his hand, but after taking a few deep breaths, he put it down again. I never take back what I give away. Red Lady sighed softly and opened her eyes. Then let me go. After saying this, she took another step forward. Li Yunxin stood in the same place and watched her walk for 6 or 7 steps. He suddenly snorted and followed her. But he didn't use his supernatural power and just walked like a mortal. After they walked side by side for a while, Red Lady turned to look at him. She was about to say something when Li Yunxin sneered. The road is not yours. I'm willing to walk for fun. In fact, there was no road. After the city of Wei was burned, the fire spread to nearby areas and burned the surrounding area into a wasteland. A few days ago, Li Yunxin made the spring come back to earth within hundreds of miles. Then there was fluffy grass around. They walked on the grass, and the city of Wei was hidden in the darkness. Looking around, they didn't know which direction was north or south. They could only see a shadow on the horizon far away. That was the place that was not affected by the fire, and still retained its original appearance. Red Lady was walking in that direction. Li Yunxin hadn't been in a hurry like this for a long time. Although it was early spring nearby, it was still very cold at night. After a while, he saw the glimmer of the remaining snow in the distance. He knew that he was about to get out of the rejuvenated land. Dongting was some distance away from the city of Wei. Therefore, the gentle coolness in the night wind gradually became chilly. He frowned. In the dark of the night, the dark green spread into the distance. The trees and bamboos that were originally yellow and withered in the distance also glowed with vitality. The two of them remained silent. If someone saw them, they would think that they were Jianghu people who were walking at night. There was only the rustling of the grass under their feet, and the sound of the night wind passing through the distant forest. In this way, the sky in the east was a little bright. They had been walking for nearly 4 hours. Red Lady finally stopped. There was a path here gradually. The bamboo forest in the distance, and the forest further away, should be part of the former wild forest. So this road should be the road that people around the city of Wei used to take when they went to the forest. There were 3 blue stones beside the bamboo forest. The stones were very smooth, and there were only some dead leaves. She thought that when the city of Wei was still a prosperous and magnificent city, there should be pedestrians who often stopped here to rest. After a long time the stones became smooth. She breathed out a few mouthfuls of mist and slowly sat on the stone. Li Yunxin stopped 2 or 3 steps away from her. He hummed and laughed. Now you should know that things are not the same as before. I gave you this body. Although some things can't be digested like mortals, you still have to eat. And because I used real materials for your body, even if you absorb everything you eat, you still have to eat the same amount as ordinary people. Otherwise, you will be as hungry as mortals. So hungry that you will be dormant when mortals die. Now you are tired of walking. It has been less than 4 hours. Do you know how tired people are at this time? It is not uncommon for people from the village to the big city to walk for 2 or 3 days. You have to chop firewood, make a fire and wash yourself. Many small things will drive you crazy. Let me ask you again. Red Lady finally spoke again. I used to live in the city of Wei for a period of time. I know all about it. Li Yunxin frowned and took a deep breath. You don't know. Do you think mortals only have to eat and drink? Where are they? Mortals will stink if they don't take a bath. How many people do you expect to take a bath every day in the current hygienic conditions? They also need to poop and pee. They use bamboo to scrape. They are all rich people. You're going to sleep with that kind of... He gasped, gritted his teeth and said fiercely, "Together? Well, I will go now. If I talk to you one more time, I will change my surname." Red Lady looked at him angrily. After he said these, she suddenly smiled. "Then you build a house for me here." Li Yunqing was stunned. "Ah. I want a bamboo house." He blinked and immediately said, "How big?" Red Lady tilted her head and looked at the bamboo forest behind her. She thought for a while. There must be grass in front of the house. There must be 3 stones and a bamboo fence. There must be a porch in front of the house. The inside of the house must be as big as the main hall of Ziwei Palace. There must be a small stream behind the house. There are beautiful pebbles in the water. It must flow into Dongting. Li Yunqing coughed. He rubbed his face. That's easy. It's just a matter of waving my hand. Are you hungry?" Red Lady smiled and said softly, "I want you to build it. I don't want you to build it with magical power." Chapter 8:14. Li Yunqing was stunned. "You mean, you want me to dig the foundation, cut the wood, tie the rope and build it one by one?" "Yes." He thought for a while. Well, alas. Red Lady was about to stand up with the help of the bluestone. "Okay." Li Yunqing sighed. "It's all about making things happen. Wait a minute. I'll get you something to eat first. Wait for me here." After saying this, he ran into the bamboo forest like a gust of wind without waiting for her to speak again. Then he used his mind, and a supreme doppelganger appeared in the city of Little Wei dozens of miles away. It was almost dawn, and it was the time when people slept the most. He appeared in front of the hut where Pheasant lived, walked through the door and walked into the hut. He saw that Chicken Spirit was not asleep, but sitting upright on the chair talking. He was talking to the 2 cats on the ground. When he was talking about, although we can't understand the supreme benevolence for the time being, he saw a white shadow by the door. He hurriedly stood up. "Master." Li Yunqing glanced at the 2 cats on the ground. He could see that their minds were gradually awakening. After all, they were reincarnated, so it was inevitable that they would progress faster. Then he looked at Pheasant. "Let me ask you, is there a wood spirit nearby? The unruly kind that does many evil things?" The so-called wood spirit referred to the spirit of plants, and there were very few of them. Even demons didn't see them very often. Pheasant was stunned. After thinking for a while, he said, "I haven't mentioned it. Oh, I heard that there is one near Mount Chilian, but I haven't heard that it does evil things. Master knows that wood spirits are very docile. Some are even more docile than humans. Did something happen?" Li Yunqing stared at him. "Is there any evil thing? What about the ugly and scary one?" Chicken Spirit realized that there might be wood spirits causing trouble, but he was even more confused. "Master, why do you ask this?" Li Yunqing sighed. He had planned to find 1 or 2 evil wood spirits to kill. After that kind of monster was killed, its real body could be used as a building material, although few people would be so wasteful. This was because the bodies of the plant demons had absorbed the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and had long been tempered to become incomparably solid. It would be a good material for building a house. She stabbed it hard into the ground. With the passage of time, the roots would gradually grow. They were more useful than any foundation, more solid than any pillar. The people of this era were not as fastidious as those of his time. Many poor families simply piled their houses on the ground with earth and stones. But he knew that this kind of thing was not very sturdy, and would collapse in a strong wind or a small tremor. How could the house he built be this kind of thing? But the problem was that among the many skills that a transmigrator should have, including but not limited to copying poems, copying lyrics, burning glass, making gunpowder, and so on, there were very few skills in building a house. The structure of the bamboo house looked quite simple, but to make it sturdy and comfortable at the same time, it wasn't something he could do with the things he knew now. He could only ask, "Are there any craftsmen in town?" The Chicken Spirit clapped his hands and said, "Master, What are you going to build? Well, as soon as the sun rises, I will give the order to call. Li Yunxin stared at him and said, Don't say anything about this. Now go and find the most beautiful craftsman here. The kind that can build a bamboo house. Now. The chicken spirit didn't know what he was going to do. Fortunately, once Li Yunxin gave the order, he would act immediately. So he replied, Yes, master. He looked around, picked up a cat and rushed out of the door. Li Yunxin walked to a chair and sat down looking around. He could see everything in the house at a glance. He got up and scratched the wall, accidentally breaking the rope on the bamboo curtain that the chicken spirit used to cover the wall. The bamboo curtain fell down with a crash. He hurriedly used a magical power to lift it up again and snorted, Tofu dregs. At this moment, someone knocked on the door. Master, I found him. Let him in. Li Yunxin coughed and said, Stay away from him. After a while, it seemed that the chicken was saying something to that person. The door was pushed open. After a while, it seemed that the chicken was saying something to that person. The door was pushed open. It was an old man, and he couldn't tell his age. He might be in his 50s or 70s. As soon as he entered the door and saw Li Yunxin's eyes, he hurriedly lowered his head and trembled, wanting to kneel down. Li Yunxin raised his hand and closed the door. Then he cast 3 inhibition spells and said, You may rise. I ask you, have you ever built a bamboo house? The old man opened his mouth. Then tell me how you built it. Tell me in detail, don't miss anything. The old man opened his mouth again, but still didn't say anything. Instead, he began to gesture with his hands and squeezed out some sounds from his throat. Li Yunxin stared at him and shouted, Chicken. The chicken spirit immediately answered outside the door. Yes, master. You found me a fucking mute. Master, he is a mute but not born mute. Some time ago, he was so tired during the construction of the city that he became mute. But he is indeed the best craftsman in the city. Master cured him. You are the kindest person in the world. Li Yunxin scolded him and cast another inhibition spell. But in the end he sighed, condensed a ball of light on his fingertip, and flicked it into the old man's body. The old man's body immediately exuded a liveliness. His white hair instantly turned black, and the wrinkles on his face seemed to be straightened. His fallen teeth came out again. He turned into a strong man in his 30s. For Li Yunxin, it was a matter of a snap of the fingers. But for mortals, it was a miracle. The man was even more speechless. He looked at himself first, then at Li Yunxin. Then he looked at himself, touched his face, hands, and looked at Li Yunxin again. He wanted to cry, God. If you dare to cry, I will make you look like before. Li Yunxin stared at him. Tell me, what do you want to do? After saying this, he waved his hand, and a small figure appeared on the ground. It was only the size of a thumb. Then, there were many bamboo poles as thin as toothpicks piled up on the side. The old man didn't dare to cry after hearing his words, but his hands were still trembling with excitement and surprise. After a while he said with the same trembling voice, Yes, yes. Immortal. Sect Master. I will tell you now. Then he really began to speak. At first his voice was out of tune, as if he was crying, but his emotions gradually calmed down, and his speech became fluent. Moreover, he discovered something else that shocked him. As he spoke, the small figure on the ground moved. Building a house was the same as any other industry in this era. It was passed down by a master and an apprentice. In addition to many common methods, there were also many skills that were unique to the sect. Even to an accomplished craftsman, it would take him a great deal of time and effort to understand it. But that small figure, no matter what he said, it was almost done as he spoke. There was no mistake at all, as if it was him. But he knew that the immortal sect master in front of him was controlling the small figure. Because when Li Yunxin moved his finger, the small figure also moved. Was this sect master a bricklayer in the past? In this way it was easier to speak. In the end, there were many things that he didn't even need to explain in detail. At this time Li Yunxin said, Skip. Next lesson. In just a quarter of an hour, the man poured out everything he had learned in his life, everything he had learned about building a bamboo house. Li Yunxin closed his eyes and thought for a while. Then, he opened his eyes and said to him seriously, I am here to test you. I told you to go to the star realm, to build a house for the celestial emperor after you died. Now it seems that your skills are good, and you can take up the position after death. Seal this matter. Once it is revealed, the good fortune will be gone. Do you understand? The man hurriedly knelt down and kowtowed repeatedly. Yes, yes, yes. But he asked again, what about the castellan, the king? Li Yunxin stared at him. Don't say it. The man shrank his head. Yes, yes. After he was sent out of the house by Li Yunxin, Shanji came in. He found that Li Yunxin had disappeared. A bamboo curtain on the wall had become a bamboo board. When the incarnation returned to the deity with the newly learned skills, Li Yunxin also walked in the bamboo forest for a quarter of an hour. He said he was going to get something to eat, but he didn't see any wild animals. So he turned around and walked out of the bamboo forest. He found Red Lady asleep on the bluestone. The sky was getting brighter, and today should be a good day. The sun slowly appeared behind the distant mountains, radiating light and heat like a real sun. Li Yunxin touched his sleeves and took out a cloak. He didn't even remember where he got it. When he first got the so-called temporary imperial residence of the demons, he felt it was very strange. Therefore, many things that he found interesting and delicious were stored in it. But he didn't need to eat or drink, nor was he afraid of cold or heat. Because he encountered all kinds of crises one after another, he slowly forgot many of them. For example, there was still half a basket of green plums in it. He explored it again, and found some good wine and food from Mu Nanju. Once taken out, it should still be steaming hot. He didn't think it was a magical power. It was made by people. So he picked up a few cold dishes. He put the cloak on her, and put the food on the other side of the bluestone. After doing this, he straightened up and looked at Red Lady. She must be tired from walking last night, and now she was in a deep sleep. Her hair hung on her face, trembling with her breath. A mortal was about to sleep. The ice-skin jade bone peach blossom dimple only made her body strong and immune to poison. But the rest was still like a mortal. Among mortals, it was an incredible existence, but compared to high-level demon cultivators, there was not much difference. Did she really like it? Li Yunxin slowly took a step back and looked at her, gradually feeling a little confused. I like it. He didn't know if this was the kind of emotion that he feared and wanted to try. He once told this female demon that the other half he wanted was an interesting soul, with all kinds of standards. But now those words were a little vague. He didn't know if it was because he had entered the supreme mental realm, or... He sighed softly and walked into the bamboo forest. He used his fingers like a knife, and with a light chop, he cut off a thick bamboo. Chapter 8:15. His palm was not as thin as a razor blade, but his pure physical strength could no longer be described with the word terrifying. The cut was neat, without a single crack, and even a bit charred. Under the effect of the powerful force, the missing part had already been smashed into smoke. By daybreak he had chopped down more than 100 thick bamboos. Then he cut the branches in the forest, cut them into different lengths according to his needs, and carried them out in 4 batches. After the 4th batch, he found that Red Lady had woken up. There were red marks on her face from her sleeping clothes, and she was eating with a cloak draped over her shoulders. She looked sleepy. She took a piece of bamboo shoot and slowly chewed on it. When she saw Li Yunxin, she asked, How long did I sleep? About 2 hours. Li Yunxin put the bamboo on the ground and walked away to measure the land. The terrain here was flat, so there was no need to level the ground. He used his divine sense to explore the ground and found that there were no pits or underground rivers, so he could build a house directly. However, when he was investigating, he discovered some interesting things, and with a thought he took them in. Red Madam stared at him with rapt attention. She saw his hand grabbing the empty air, grabbing a lump of mud, big or small, and throwing it to the side. She thought for a while and asked, What are they? Things you will need in the future. Li Yunxin clapped his hands. This can't be considered building a house with divine power. Red Lady smiled. She took another bite of bamboo shoot and asked, Do you know how to build a house? Li Yunxin smiled modestly. I heard someone mention it, so it shouldn't be a problem. After saying this, the ground was more or less measured. It was all fluffy grass, so there was no need to level it for the time being. Because he planned to build the house off the ground, the craftsman said it would be warm in winter and cool in summer, and it wouldn't breed mosquitoes. The newly harvested bamboo should be dried for a few days before being made into bamboo. But he felt that he would have a way to solve this kind of problem in the future. So he skipped to the next step. So he began to build the framework. It was more convenient for him to do this kind of thing than ordinary people. If he had to use a big hammer to hit it, he could just raise his hand and press it down. What needed to be cut with a saw, he only needed to pinch with 2 fingers. But there were other trifling matters which he had to do himself, and so it took him the whole morning. Fortunately, he felt like a little character in a game. As long as he didn't die, he wouldn't feel tired. If he still had patience, he could work for 3 to 4 days in a row. Red Madam gradually began to talk to him. But she must have deliberately avoided talking about the things that happened after they met, and only briefly talked about the things that she used to play in the city of Wei. Li Yunqin was busy with his work. He also felt that the wide sleeves of the robe were a hindrance to his hands and feet. So he changed it into an inner garment and rolled up the sleeves. The demoness, watching the golden rays of the sun on his face and arms, would often pause after saying a few words and stare at him for a while. Thus another afternoon passed. At first, Li Yunqin only did this to deal with her. But gradually he found joy in it, a kind of creative joy. In fact, mortals could also experience this kind of joy. But after growing up, there were too many things that covered up the joy itself. For example, he had other things in his mind, and wanted to finish them as soon as possible. Or because of physical reasons, he got tired after a while. So the physical pain replaced the psychological pleasure. Or he had to worry about the rewards and evaluation after the work was done, and other things that had nothing to do with the work itself. It was not only like building houses, but also doing many other things. This was the bitterness of life. But Li Yunqin was in a favorable situation at the moment. When he first chose a site, he had a brief idea in his mind. He should find a place with good feng shui. But soon he realized what good feng shui. He was the good feng shui of this world now. He was already the Grand Elder, and there was nothing to be afraid of in the Midland. Even the King Rock had to be afraid of his power, as well as the people behind him and underground. He had to find old Lu, the 9th young master, and the sheriff. But it was not urgent. Shanji had ordered people to find him, but his power and information channels were not enough compared to Golden Rock. He still had to wait for the news, so he had no threat, and he had to stay idle for a few days. He didn't need to care about the rewards, and he didn't feel tired. The process of work became the purest creation. Building a bamboo house slowly from scratch with mortal methods was a very pleasant experience. He gradually became absorbed in it. When it was near dusk, the green grass was coated with a layer of golden light by the sun. The framework was roughly built, and the bottom layer was also formed. Li Yunqin jumped up and stamped on it, feeling that he had done a good job. So far, he didn't even use a rope. He decided to make it all into a mortise and tenon structure. Then he turned his eyes and saw Red Lady standing by the bluestone in a big cloak. She had been here for a whole day. Although the two of them had been talking, they would stop after a few sentences. In fact, she had watched him work all day. So Li Yunqin jumped down again. He looked at the sky and asked her, "Do you want to eat something hot?" Red Lady looked at him and said, "Okay." Li Yunqin took out a fire starter from his sleeve. Spring had returned to the area last night, and there were quite a number of withered branches that had fallen during the winter in the grass. They picked up those withered branches from the surroundings and lit a fire. There should be smoke, but he suppressed it. So a bonfire was lit, and it was getting dark. They sat by the bluestone by the fire, and ate some hot food that Li Yunqin took out. After chatting for a while, the moon rose. Red Lady put on a big cloak and fell asleep on Li Yunqin's legs. But he didn't need to sleep. He just looked at the stars in the sky, listened to the insects in the grass, and heard the crackling of the bonfire. The world was silent. 3 days passed quickly, and the bamboo house had taken shape. But they didn't talk much. Red Lady often looked at his figure when he was working for a long time. She only responded gently when he asked. Li Yunxin made a small stream behind the house. He put his feet deep in the grass and ran all the way to Dongting. The river was formed. He found a water hole a few miles away and brought water up with supernatural powers. A small hill was moved, and a few large stones were piled on top of it, so that the sweet water flowed down the hill and into the river. He walked slowly along the gradually clear river. He held a rock as big as a house in his left hand, and dug a small piece from the rock with his right hand. He threw it into the water. When he walked to the downstream 2 miles away from the bamboo house, the rock was dug out by him. The place he passed was really covered with smooth pebbles. He also set up some gadgets in the house with the netherworld power in his body, and some simple mechanisms. For example, he made cabinets and stoves just like in his world. The netherworld power was stored in the silver box under the stove, and a simple inhibition was cast on it. When Red Madam turned the knob made of black jade, a flame was ignited in the stove, which was carved by the hand of a stone spirit. It was big or small as she wanted. Of course, he also made a refrigerator. The 2 doors carved from snow essence even saved on the power of the netherworld. As for the toiletries and water sources used in the kitchen and bathroom, they were all made of rare stones and purified water from underground. In short, he arranged this house according to the convenience he could think of in his previous life, and the strange treasures he could get in this life. There should be only one such house in the world built for mortals, by the means of the Grand Elder. He didn't allow Red Lady to come in and see first. He only asked her to sit on the stone bench in the courtyard and wait. He looked around, and felt that he had thought of all the things he should think about. Then he walked out of the house. But when he was halfway down the stairs, he suddenly said, "Wait for me for a while." So he came back after half an hour and took a horse. She said she found it in the mountains and gave it to her as a mount. She didn't know where she caught a big shiny black cat. She said it was lost in the nearby house, and she could keep it to relieve her boredom. But Red Madam could see that when she saw Li Yunxin coming, there was a lone wolf walking in the distant forest. The wolf glanced at the horse, and immediately ran away with its tail between its legs. The black cat was not afraid of the horse. The horse was afraid of it. He washed the things he dug out from the surrounding ground before he built the house. He found that they were all gold and silver wares, and they seemed to be quite old. Li Yunxin rolled them into a ball, then pinched them into pieces, and put them into a wooden box. After doing all this, the 4th day had passed. When the moon rose, Li Yunxin led Red Lady into the house. The house was filled with the fragrance of plants, and there was a warm yellow light. Even if the demoness didn't know that in Li Yunxin's world, people used ambient lights to enhance the atmosphere and style, she could still feel the ingenuity of the use of light and shadow. She looked at the house for a long time. Finally, she looked at Li Yunxin and said, "I like it very much. This is how I want it to be." Li Yunxin let out a long breath and said with a smile, "If you feel bored living here, I can move to a nearby city. The Emperor of Rome Kingdom shouldn't mind." Or, Red Lady suddenly turned around and hugged him, her face pressed against his shoulder. Li Yunxin felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His whole body became stiff, as if he couldn't even lift his hand. "Little you or I," he whispered, "now. Actually, you don't know." The demoness whispered in his ear. He expected to be caught unprepared, and not know how to refuse. She just stuck close to him and spoke. This made Li Yunxin feel a little more comfortable. "Don't know what? Don't know yourself. You hate it when people let you down. You don't know if you feel sorry for me, or if you really feel something else. You just remade a body for me and let me live. But even if I live, I don't know. I don't know if I like you now because of my past obsession, or if I really like you. I want to leave and think about it. You feel that I let you down. So when you get angry, it's like a toy that was taken away from you, and you have to get it back." Red Lady slowly turned her face and caressed his shoulder. "After these 4 days, have you thought it through?" Li Yunxin was silent for a while. His body softened, no longer like a hard rock. He slowly looked at the house, not knowing why his mind was a little empty. Finally he whispered, "I'm also thinking." Red Lady grabbed the clothes on his back. "But only for a while. She slowly pushed him away, all the way to the door. Then think about it. After you think about it, come back to me. Or don't come back to me. The bamboo door was gently closed. Before their line of sight was blocked, Li Yunqin found that she didn't cry like before. Chapter 8:16. He stood outside the door for a while. He raised his hand, and then put it down. He turned around and walked down the stairs slowly. The black cat was lying on the stone table, and the horse was in the stable in the north of the courtyard. Both of them looked up and lowered their heads when they saw him. Li Yunqin stayed in the courtyard for a while and said in a low voice, "Take care of her. If you do well, it will be your blessing. If you don't do well, it will be a disaster." Then he strode out of the courtyard. It was late at night when he returned to the city of Wei. Because he walked back, his clothes were stained with night dew. He walked slowly along the street and looked at the houses on both sides. Compared to the previous city of Wei, or the towns in his world, this place looked shabby. A few days ago, it was the Flower Goddess Festival. Many people decorated their houses with flowers made of straw. In the past few days, spring had returned, and some people had picked newly bloomed wildflowers to decorate their doors. When he first came here, he didn't have the mood to look at these things. But now he saw everything. He also saw the uneven streets and the filth on both sides of the street. He sighed and said, "Pheasant." After a dozen breaths, the chicken spirit ran out from the corner. The sound of footsteps echoed in the alley. A few people opened their windows, looked out, and then closed them again. When Li Yunqin entered the city, no one was alarmed. But when he preached, many demons in the city came. The preaching was not allowed to be spread, but the preaching itself was not something that could not be said. So in these few days, people knew that the hierarch and president was in the city. If he was a real person, many people would probably want to find him and see if they could see his face. But the person represented by the name, Li Yunqin, was like a god in the hearts of most people and demons in the city of Wei. The most common reaction of mortals to his arrival in the city was that after their children did something wrong or said something disrespectful, they would say in fear and trepidation in their hearts, "Master Li, please don't blame me. Please don't blame me. Children are not sensible. Children are not sensible." It was as if he had become the embodiment of heaven and earth and became a god. No one would have guessed that on such a chilly spring night, he had been rejected and was strolling on the street. When the chicken spirit saw his current appearance, he knew that something had happened. However, he also knew that if his master wanted to say something, he would say it. It was best for him not to say anything. She moved forward and walked beside him. After walking for a while, when they reached the end of the street, Li Yunqin finally stopped and said, "I haven't asked you these past few days. When I came here, I heard there were white-collar workers. Where did they come from? Is it enough for now?" The pheasant exhaled a mouthful of white gas. "I killed a few small demon monarchs earlier and plundered some, but most of it was bought in Ji and in the south with gold and silver taken from their lair. There were many demons in the city, so transporting the goods was not troublesome. But these days, the outside world has been peaceful, so it wouldn't be good for us to raid their houses. Indeed, we don't have enough." Master asked at the right time. Li Yunqin was stunned. "Ha!" Shanji was also stunned. "Master asked me this. Isn't he going to give me money?" Li Yunqin shook his head. He didn't know whether he smiled bitterly or angrily, but there was a smile in the end. "You wish. I want to ask you if the food in the city is enough to expand and renovate the city." The pheasant blinked. "This how to renovate? Expand it a little more?" Li Yunqin raised his hand and pointed to the street. "The road should be flat. The road surface should be paved with bricks. There should be underground canals on both sides of the road for drainage in rainy days and sewage in normal days. What are these piled up on the side of the road?" The pheasant looked to the side of the road. There was some domestic garbage and excrement, but he didn't feel much about it. Even when the city of Wei was prosperous, there were only a few roads that were solid and clean on both sides. In the alleys, it was almost the same. There was night incense in normal days, but not every family was willing to pay for it. But according to what Li Yunqin said, he wanted to make every road in the city like this. And the roadsides should be clean. He knew that the master liked cleanliness, but he didn't expect it to be so clean. But he just nodded. Yes. I understand. The master wants the city to be clean, and no filth can be seen. Li Yunxin nodded and said, It will cost a lot of money, right? The pheasant was relieved in his heart. He said hurriedly, If we need manpower, we need food. The demons in the city can be used, but it's not enough. We need people. These people haven't settled down in the city for a long time. Many of them are sick and weak, and they have just eaten for a few days. If we ask them to do so many things, I'm afraid they will make trouble. Li Yunxin turned to look at him. Are you afraid they will make trouble? Are you still keeping them for free? The pheasant was stunned again. After thinking for a long time about the meaning of Li Yunxin's words, he said, Mrs. Sanhua taught us that the master said we shouldn't harm people's lives. I thought. So you have to be nice to them and not let them suffer. Do you think I want to do that? Li Yunxin smiled. There is nothing in the world that doesn't suffer. I'm the one who suffers. The last sentence was said very softly like a murmur. The pheasant didn't hear it clearly and asked, What did the master say? But Li Yunxin said with a straight face, You can't go on like this. You have to find something for them to do. Otherwise, they will make trouble when they are full. Also, you have to let them make a living in the future, so that they can do their own work. You want to build a city, not a refugee camp. He thought for a while, reached out and grabbed a broken bowl from the ground. It should be something used by the residents of the city of Wei in the past. Maybe it was pressed deeply when the city was burned, so it wasn't broken or burned. Take this bowl. Take as much as you want from it. Li Yunxin handed the bowl to him. When you take money, say Master Li 3 times. The gold and silver in the bowl didn't come from somewhere else. It came from the city of Wei. No one knew how much gold and silver had been burned and buried in the ground. But with the wealth of the city of Wei in the past, it shouldn't be a problem to build another city exactly the same. If it weren't for the fact that the city of Wei was destroyed by the Xianmen, the surrounding people all felt that this was an ominous place that was punished by heaven, and the war broke out later. This place would have been occupied by treasure hunters in a few days. But when Pheasant took the bowl, he realized one thing. His master was unhappy again. In just a few days, he was very unhappy for the second time. So he started to say funny things to amuse him. Compared with the previous days, he was much calmer tonight, and his face was much more serious. When he looked at the streets in the city, he seemed to be thinking about something, as if his mind was not here. So he asked carefully, Master, do you have any other orders? Li Yunxin was silent for a while, and said, Build the city of Wei into an interesting, beautiful and clean city. It's spring now, it's time to plant the land. I think the southwest is good. You can ask people to cultivate the land in the southwest. Go there yourself tomorrow, and keep walking in that direction. You will probably see a bamboo house. Don't go there, think about it yourself. How far to cultivate the land from there? The people inside can see people coming and going from a distance, but they won't disturb the peace near the bamboo house. And tell those people that unless the owner inside comes to talk to them, they are not allowed to go there. Deal with some dirty things when cultivating the land. Pheasant thought for a while, and said seriously, Got it. But the dirty things you mean, are they the Een spirits and the souls of the dead nearby? I'll deal with them tonight. Li Yunxin glanced at him. I mean shit and urine. Pheasant said. Oh. He scratched his head, and looked at Li Yunxin's face and said hesitantly, Master, do you want to do something else? Something else? For example, get some smart peddlers who are not annoying. He blinked, female peddlers. I'll carry some fresh toys on my shoulders, as well as some oil, salt, soy sauce, vinegar, needles and thread, or the 4 treasures of the study. I'll go there every few days to sell my goods. Li Yunxin thought for a while. Okay. Pheasant rubbed his hands happily. Master, but he the golden house. Li Yunxin glanced at him. It's Li Xinyu. Pheasant was stunned. Ah, if it's her, don't worry. She's immortal now. Pheasant was stunned again. After a while he said, Well, then we can ask her to live in the city. I can also. She thinks the city is boring. Li Yunxin looked at the street. I also think it's dirty. It's not that you didn't do a good job. Only a few people in the world can do this. But you need to improve. Pheasant agreed. Then he thought for a while and said, Master, I have news. Someone said he saw you Meng in the city of Wei. Li Yunxin's face changed. Why did you say it now? You were not in a good mood just now. Pheasant whispered. It's not good news, but it's not urgent. It's like this. The informant from Rongjun said he saw a man with a maid, a patient, and a black cat in the chaos. At that time, he had escaped with the refugees and disappeared without a trace. It was in the area of the former Lai Kingdom. It happened a month ago, and I just got the news. Li Yunxin frowned and thought for a while. No supernatural power? I don't think so. Pheasant said. The person over there is smart. If there is, he will report it. I've already asked him to look for it. The chief didn't transform into a human, but showed his original form. Li Yunxin shook his head. It's not good news. Well, do your job well. I'm leaving. Master, are you going to look for them? Yes. After saying this, Li Yunxin's figure had already disappeared. Pheasant sighed and saw a piece of paper floating down from the sky. He hurriedly took it and found it was folded. It was a small paper man cut out. With a thought, he felt the majestic demonic power in it. It was a magic weapon. He had no doubt that if he unfolded it, these paper men would jump to the ground and become tireless laborers who could be used to repair the city of Wei. Chapter 8:17. The news came a bit strangely. When he entered the former Lai Kingdom, this thought suddenly emerged in Li Yunxin's mind. It was not the news itself but the timing. When he was a little depressed because of Red Lady's matter, an informant happened to send him the information he obtained more than a month ago. This timing seemed to be a bit perfect. If someone really did it on purpose, it couldn't be the pheasant. It should be the informant's problem, intentionally or unintentionally. But these were all trivial matters. Li Yunxin thought it was most likely the Rock King's doing. But if this method was used to lure him here, it meant that things had not developed to the worst. It seemed that there was still room for discussion. With this thought in mind, he walked for a while and entered Shuanghu City. It was said that Yu Meng and the others were later kidnapped by refugees and entered this city. Then the Rong army sealed the city and began to investigate the hidden remnants of the previous dynasty. The matter ended a few days ago, and the city gate was reopened. Li Yunxin thought he would see a dilapidated scene after entering the city, but what he saw was a bustling scene. There were indeed Rong soldiers patrolling the streets, but the shops on both sides of the street were open. Many civilians walked back and forth, and even beggars and hawkers could be seen. All the restaurants, tea houses, and all kinds of shops that were open were decorated with lanterns and streamers. Those who did not know the situation would think that they were celebrating a festival. He thought that the Rong army wanted to use this method to calm the people's hearts as soon as possible, so that people could see that once the towns under Emperor Rong's rule were assimilated, they would quickly regain their prosperity. But there were 1 or 2 black bloodstains that had not been washed off by the streets, which seemed to remind people that this kind of prosperity did not come easily. He walked a dozen steps along the street and looked around casually. He wondered where Yu Meng would be if he was still in this city. If someone deliberately lured him here, what did they intend to do in this prosperous city? Soon he found some clues. Someone was staring at him. The gaze lingered on him for more than 3 seconds or 6 times. He immediately turned his face and found that the person who was observing him was standing at a street corner. He looked like an idler. He was a middle-aged man with short clothes and an ordinary appearance. When he saw Li Yunxin's gaze turn to him, he did not avoid it. Instead, he smiled at him and took the initiative to walk over. This person was interesting. Li Yunxin probed his aura and discovered that he was neither a fiendish demon nor a cultivator. Instead, he was an ordinary person. The man took more than 10 steps to stand in front of him and bowed. "Greetings, Dragon King." Li Yunxin thought about it. "Are they from Southernwood Lodge or the Freemasons?" "Freemasonry." The newcomer smiled. "Dragon King's discerning eyes are like torches. So now you're siding with the Golden Rock." The man laughed again. Dragon King guessed wrong on this point. I'm Dragon King's man. Li Yunqin raised his eyebrows. Oh, which Dragon King? Now in this world besides you, who else is worthy of the 2 words Dragon King? The newcomer said solemnly. We are indeed Dragon King's people. And we will temporarily listen to the orders of the person in charge. The person in charge also has a very close relationship with Dragon King. Li Yunqin sighed. Don't be deliberately mystifying. Tell me, who is the person in charge? Dragon King, please look up. The man raised his hand. The person in charge is waiting for you upstairs. Li Yunqin turned his head and looked in the direction he was pointing. They were standing in front of a restaurant called Hongtai Restaurant. It was a 3-story restaurant with octagonal flying eaves. Currently, there was a man sitting by the railing on the 3rd floor. Seeing his gaze, the man nodded and smiled. Li Yunqin's eyes were slightly cold. He lowered his head in silence for a while, then turned and entered the door. Walking up the wooden stairs to the 3rd floor, he found that the entire floor had been booked. The hall was empty except for a man sitting at a table by the window. There were a few dishes and a half-empty bottle of wine on the table. It seemed that the man had been waiting for some time. He looked at the man at the top of the stairs for a while, then slowly walked over. His expression was cold and his voice solemn. Li Chunfeng, now you've become a member of the Freemasonry? Li Chunfeng reached out and grabbed another bottle of wine from the air. He took out a cup and placed it in front of Li Yunqin. He turned to Li Yunqin and said with a smile, Yes, they're my people. Not only them, but the painting Dao created by Lu Gongzan is also my people now. I still revere your name. Anyway, both of them are abandoned pieces. They're still useful in my hands. Sit down, we can talk about it slowly. Li Yunqin walked to the table. His gaze swept over the dishes and wine, and he said coldly, Oh, I forgot. You've always been good at recycling trash, like me and Sheng Guanyu. Li Chunfeng stopped smiling. He shook his head and sighed. Your hatred for me is very justified. But your mother, Sheng Guanyu, was also a pitiful person. In the past, many things were not easy to say before the time was right. Now that the time is right, sit down. I'll tell you everything. Li Yunqin was silent for a while. I've more or less understood what you wanted to say. There's no need to repeat it a second time. What you understand is only part of it. Li Chunfeng looked at him with a strange light in his eyes. If one were to disregard all prejudices and emotions, it would be the light of gazing at a precious jade that one had painstakingly carved. Now I'll tell you another part. It's about my origins. This part, you'll be the first person in the world to know. Li Yunqin frowned. After thinking for 2 breaths, he finally looked at him. Do you want to tell me that you're also from a world with airplanes, cannons, and even interstellar warships? No. Li Chunfeng looked at him. It's more complicated than that. Fine. I'll listen to you. Li Yunqin exhaled softly and sat down opposite him. He took out a pot of mu nanchun and a cup from his sleeve. He pushed the cup that Li Chunfeng had prepared for him aside, poured a cup of wine, and drank it. After drinking 2 more cups, he said in a low voice, Go ahead. The man opposite him pushed the wine cup in front of him aside as well. He thought for a moment and said, You've always thought that Xie Sheng is the person we want, but you're not. You're wrong about that. Xie Sheng is the person they're looking for. But the person I want isn't him, it's you. To me, Xie Sheng is the abandoned pawn. I've been very clear about this since the moment you were born. It's still the same even now. I've been observing you for more than 10 years. They thought I was observing you for them, but I was only observing you for myself. I told them that your temperament was unstable, and they didn't know if you were the person they wanted, or if you'd run down from the astral plane. So they needed more time to slowly observe you. Half of what I said was true, and the other half was false. Li Yunqin looked up at him. Which is true, and which is false? It's true that your temperament is unstable, because I've slowly come to know that you don't have the emotions of ordinary people. The rest of what I said was just to buy time. Li Yunqin smiled. Are you trying to tell me that you knew I was heartless from the moment I was born? I'm curious how you could tell. Because I was originally the same as you. Li Chunfeng looked at him seriously. You acted very well. Ordinary people can't see it. But that's what I used to be. I can see it. So what you're going to tell me next is that it's a big coincidence that a person who was originally as heartless as me came to this world, and that a heartless person like me happened to be born many years later. And then you know all my thoughts. Everything you do next is for my own good? Li Yunqing curled his lips and shook his head. If there are too many coincidences in one thing, then it should be made up. Li Chunfeng was silent for a while, then suddenly said, How do you know I was originally a person? It doesn't matter, Li Yunqing sneered. It's the same if you're a spirit. So are you a spirit reincarnation? Not really. Li Chunfeng slowly raised his hand and made a stroke in the air. Then a spindle-shaped object appeared in the air. Inside this spindle, there were countless fluorescent lights dancing. Every one of them was extremely small, like a speck of dust. This is a big universe. Hearing this word coming out of his mouth, Li Yunqing wasn't surprised. If his explanation of his identity was one of the few truths he had ever told. Li Chunfeng pointed at the speck of dust. This is a small universe. For example, the small universe of this world, and the small universe of the world you came from. There are many such universes, just like these specks of dust. They move and collide in the big universe without any pattern. This is what happened to the collision of this world. He paused as he said this. But Li Yunqing didn't ask anything. He just poured himself another glass of wine. Then he continued. Both sides mean nothingness. One side is nothingness because of absolute order. There is no randomness, no movement. So even the Big Bang doesn't happen, and nothing exists. The other side is nothingness because of absolute chaos. Because of absolute chaos, all rules are invalid. And there is nothing. The part in the middle, the part where you can see many small universes dancing, is the habitable zone between these two extremes. There is order, but there is also chaos. Chaos and randomness cause the universe to be born and evolve. But the order ensures that there are certain rules to follow, and it won't collapse. In the words of your world or this world, the laws of physics are macroscopically orderly. But on the microscopic level, such as the quantum level, it is also disorderly. Of course, this is still an inappropriate metaphor. So this kind of place is called a habitable zone. When Li Chunfeng said this, he was a bit like Shen Mu, but his expression and tone were gentler than Shen Mu's. The way he looked at Li Yunqing reminded the latter of the past. Once when he was young, when he taught him the art of painting, he was patient and gentle, ready to stop at any time because of a question and explain with even more patience. At that time, they were in their own courtyard. There were still some mottled shadows on the ground. Li Yunqing took a deep breath and turned his face away. So, there is no clear dividing line between the world of absolute order, the world of absolute chaos, and the habitable zone. It's gradual, Li Chunfeng said softly. Those closer to the side of order may be more law-abiding. If there is a nearby universe, perhaps there are only strict rules, and very little randomness. We can't infer what that kind of world looks like. As for those closer to the side of chaos, it is a universe that is more chaotic than our world, or even the world you came from. In there are more rules that you can't understand. You already know such a world. It is the universe that is colliding with the universe we are in. In there, perhaps the so-called living things do not have a fixed form. Everything exists in the form of energy. But because it has not become too chaotic, it can still exist. In the past, this universe, and the universe you came from, were considered to be worlds with relative rules in the habitable zone. There are many such universes, many such universes. And there are also many relatively chaotic worlds. But the so-called habitable zone of these two worlds is only a very small part of the entire universe. You can even say that it is negligible. The diagram I made is just to make it easier for you to understand. Li Chunfeng said slowly. Do you understand now? Li Yunqing let out a sigh. Don't ask me in that tone. I am not that kid now. And I have never been. Li Chunfeng smiled tolerantly. Then you understand. You have always been smart. So another thing is not difficult to understand. Like all worlds, the orderly will eventually develop into the disorderly. For example, the collapse of a house, the shattering of a wine glass. This is a process of entropy increase. The big universe also follows this process. In the beginning, perhaps the whole big universe was absolutely orderly. Also, nothing existed at all. But then chaos appeared, and there was a relatively orderly world. Then there was a world in the habitable zone. And then there was a relatively chaotic world. And finally, there was an absolutely chaotic world. This can be seen as a gradual process of erosion. And it is also in this erosion that a habitable world is born. But the habitable world also becomes chaotic and uninhabitable because of the erosion, and eventually leads to another kind of destruction. For example, in the beginning, the world was a ball of ice. Then there was a fire burning outside. It was too cold inside and too hot outside. Only the small part where the ice and fire came into contact with each other was just right. But the ball of ice would also get smaller and smaller, and eventually, the whole big universe would become an absolutely chaotic world, and nothing would exist. Li Yunqin frowned. You don't have to be so long-winded. This law also exists in our so-called small universe. Starting from the Big Bang, the density of matter became thin, and then stars and planets were born. Then, the universe expanded, and everything became too thin, and finally, everything was destroyed. He sighed and looked at Li Chunfeng. I am not a native of this world. Can you get to the point? Li Chunfeng smiled. Okay. The point is, I come from a world that was destroyed like this one. Li Yunqin was stunned. You. I said there are many such worlds. Collisions happen all the time. Just like human history, the history of your world, and the history of this world before. The period of peaceful development is short, and the time of war is the majority. In a small universe, the probability of not being hit is actually very small. Hundreds of millions of years, billions of years, tens of billions of years, are all very short. Most of the worlds are colliding, so don't think that this universe is unlucky. It is just a normal occurrence. Chapter 8:18. Li Chuanfeng's expression turned serious. My world is very lucky. It took more than 60 billion years for it to collide with the chaotic world. But at that time, we could already adapt to the chaos. So many people escaped. Li Yunqin's hand paused on the wine glass. He turned to stare at Li Chunfeng and frowned. You mean, you came from another world apart from this world and my world? It's not unusual, Li Chunfeng said in a low voice. Li Chunfeng said in a deep voice. Countless universes collide and intertwine, creating something like a wormhole. When a world gradually becomes chaotic, it will also gradually become riddled with holes. So transmigrators appear. It's very normal. He paused and looked at Li Yunqin. Transmigration is not a strict term. It should be called falling. From a more orderly world, falling into a more chaotic world. A person's falling is a long process, like the horizon of a black hole. You should know about the horizon. Many of the emotions in her heart were temporarily blocked by the fact that Li Chunfeng might have come from another world. Li Yunqin said slowly. You mean, for example, a person falling into a black hole. At that moment, he has already been torn apart and pulled in. But the light particles reflected from his body also escape outside the black hole. When they escape to the edge, they can't go any further because of the gravitational force of the black hole. That can be seen as a stop. So an observer outside the black hole can still see that person. Feel that he is still alive, still existing, but falling infinitely slower. But what he sees is just an image. You mean this kind of thing? Li Chunfeng smiled approvingly. He nodded. Yes. Of course, this is just a metaphor. The black hole itself is not connected to any unknown place. But there may be a space-time black hole between two universes that are relatively close. Such a thing is a passage between two universes. You came from your world. The principle is similar. Li Yunqin realized something. This made his expression change. You mean, in my original world, I still exist? Yes. Li Chunfeng nodded. Right now you exist here and there. As I said, the fall is a very slow process. It might last for hundreds of millions of years. You have lived here for more than 10 years. In the other world, it might only be a few days. This kind of thing might not only happen to you in your world. Perhaps many people are falling. But because human history is too short, no one has been able to observe the entire process. Li Yunxin's fingers trembled slightly. He drank 1 glass of wine, then 2 more. Then he raised his head and looked at Li Chunfeng seriously, as if he had never seen him before. In other words, you weren't a human before. Not any kind of being that we can understand. You came from your world to this place. Li Chunfeng nodded slowly. Yes, but I have fled here, with a plan. Or rather, I am a savior. The drop was a drop from a relatively orderly world to an even more chaotic world. I, on the other hand, did the opposite. We used unimaginable resources, and only sent a few dozen people. We are the saviors. Li Yunxin stared at him in a daze for a while, but there was no cold smile on his face like before. Then he slowly leaned against the back of the chair and sighed. If this is true, why didn't you say it earlier? Just because I have an unstable mind. You know, it's hard for humans to understand the feelings of plants. Li Chunfeng was silent for a while before he shook his head. But the difference between me and you in the past is not something that can be measured by humans and plants. It took me a long time to adapt to this world, to adapt to being a human. That's why I said that I can see what kind of person you were in the past. But even if it was the you of the past, it was a time for me to adapt extremely successfully. I have a way to save this world. He looked at Li Yunxin. But I need someone to cooperate with me. Not someone from this world, but someone from another world. That's why I've been waiting, not for Xie Sheng, but for someone like you. I've even observed Chen Zhao before. But back then, you didn't care about this world. And saving this world requires you to pay a huge price. I have to know if you're suitable. Or rather, I have to ask you to be suitable. You went from being emotionless to having feelings, from not caring about anything to now having someone you can risk your life for. It's all part of my plan. My gaze has never been on Xie Sheng, but on you. I saw you shed your first tear for me and Shangguan Yu in the city of Wei. I also knew that you risked your life to kill the ancestor for Lu Gongzan and the others. So now, I know that you're ready. Li Yunxin's fingertip tapped on the rim of the cup. Outside the window, there was a hubbub of voices, full of vitality. This made the conversation between the two seem unreal, as if they were talking in a dream. But Li Yunxin knew that what they were talking about was the naked, terrifying truth of this world. The vast world was just a tiny speck of dust in a corner of a tiny particle of the universe. And the two of them were the specks of dust in this dust. After a while he said in a low voice, "What do I need to sacrifice?" "It could be everything you have right now," Li Chunfeng said slowly, "this real world." Li Yunxin took a deep breath. "You mean to put the whole world into the painting scroll? You subdued the Freemasonry and Taoist Danqing to prepare for this." "Taoist Danqing can draw the earth qi for me. The Freemasonry knows mechanical drawing, so they can ensure the accuracy of the Taoist's brush. Plus the preparation I've been making, it's almost complete." Li Chunfeng took out a scroll from his sleeve and slowly pushed it to Li Yunxin. "You're now a Grand Supreme, so you can help me finish the last stroke. You can understand the painting path created by Xin Mu as using a new law to shrink the projection of this real world into another dimension. Then, I'll use the method I used to ask you to bring this world in the painting back to your world. The projection is just an example. For example, the you in this world right now is just a projection of you in that world. So this place can temporarily escape the disaster. But the price you have to pay is that once you go back, your so-called Grand Supreme Power can only be fully effective in this world in the painting. When you go back to your own world, your power will be greatly weakened because you lack the support of the law. Only you can do this. Neither Chen Zhao nor Xie Sheng can do it. Li Yunxin thought for a while and looked at him. Is this the so-called great sacrifice? You know I don't care about these things. These powers. To me, they're just byproducts in the process of survival. Li Chunfeng smiled. It's the current you who doesn't care. If it was you in the past, which would you choose between saving the world or experiencing new laws and discovering interesting things? I think you'd choose the latter. Even if you die with the world, you wouldn't care as long as you're happy. Li Yunxin suddenly stared at him. Is Lu Gongzan someone you arranged? Li Chunfeng thought for a moment and smiled. No. So Li Yunqin didn't ask further. He just looked away again. After listening to the voices outside the window for a while, he said, "You should tell me the truth. Now, I can tell myself to think that the so-called relationship between father and son isn't important. In this grand background of destruction, you and I are just two travelers who met by chance. If you look at it from this perspective, I can forgive many of the things you've done to me. You have your plan. And it's not evil or bad. You used me, so something happened. Just like in my plans, Lu Gongzan was often used as a tool. But he doesn't care. We're not father and son." Li Yunqin shook his head. "It doesn't matter about family. We're the same kind of people. The current me can understand the things I did in the past, so I can understand you. But since we're the same kind of people, please don't hide anything from me." He smiled. It was the first time he smiled at Li Chunfeng, and said, "What other sacrifices are there?" Li Chunfeng sighed and said, "Fine. There is indeed another thing." As he said this, he dipped his fingertip into the wine and dripped 2 drops on the table. They were so close to each other that they were almost touching, but there was still some distance between them, so they were still 2 separate drops of wine. "You fell from your world to this place, which means that your world has begun the process of being eroded by chaos. But this process will be very long. It should have just begun. I also said that you fell here because of a black hole in space and time. Then this black hole is actually like a pipe. Or rather, you in this world and you in that world form a pipe. It connects the 2 worlds. When you cultivate and come into contact with the chaotic laws here to become stronger, you're constantly storing water in this pipe. When the water reaches a certain level, it begins to flow into your world. So your body is filled with power and becomes extremely strong. Because it can almost be seen that the powerful force of this chaotic world has begun to erode your world through you." He looked at Li Yunqin. "So you become a Grand Supreme. Grand Supreme has nothing to do with the state of mind. It's just an inevitable process. For a transmigrator like you, there are a few other Grand Supremes in this world who use similar methods. Chen Zhao became a Grand Supreme. Golden Rock became a Grand Supreme. And the people from the Xianmen became Grand Supreme. It's the same logic, but they didn't build a passage between the 2 universes. Instead, they built a passage between this small world and the chaotic world outside. This small cycle also gives them great power, but it will also speed up the destruction of this world. It's like drinking poison to quench thirst. If you bring this small world back to the other side, it means something like this." Li Chunfeng raised his hand and swiped between the 2 drops of wine on the table. The 2 drops immediately fused into one, becoming a complete drop. The 2 worlds will have closer contact, and the erosion will become stronger, speeding up the destruction of your world. This process is extremely slow for humans, but for the entire small universe, it might be billions or even tens of billions of years earlier. This is another price. Li Yunqin stared at the drop of water and said in a low voice, "It allows this place to struggle at death's door, but it speeds up the destruction of my world." "Yes." He was silent for 2 breaths before he laughed and shook his head. "If the trend of the entire universe is to keep colliding and pushing chaos toward order, then everything will be destroyed in the end. Compared to this trend, and compared to human civilization and the lifespan of the universe, billions or tens of billions of years are nothing. Maybe before the early end happens, human civilization would have been destroyed more than 10 billion years ago. Why do you think I care about this?" Li Yunqin raised his eyebrows. "Or maybe this is immoral in your previous world." Li Chunfeng heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Yes, it's immoral. For example, the people here think it's immoral to torture and kill cute animals, even if they belong to different races. In my world, the previous civilization ensures that the next civilization has enough time and resources. It's a recognized moral principle. But what we're about to do goes against this moral principle. This is because I've realized that this kind of morality is useless. Staying in a universe for a long time will only lead to destruction. Only constantly escaping to a more habitable world is the right thing to do. This is also the difference between me and the others." Li Yunxin smiled. This is indeed the you I know. Li Chunfeng also smiled. It's also the you I know. The two looked at each other for a while. Li Yunxin slowly turned his face away. Fine. In other words, after taking care of the things on the surface, we have to do this. Yes. But I hope you'll be the one to convince them. Li Chunfeng looked at him. And to do this, we have to wait for some time. Not immediately. How long do we have to wait? Li Chunfeng shook his head. It depends on the timing. Maybe a few years, maybe a decade, or even a few decades. Li Yunxin sighed. Yes. Well, for people like you who look at the whole universe. Sometime, a few years, a decade, or a few decades. Fine. Then where are you Meng and the others now? Also, other than waiting for some time, are there any small things to do? Li Chunfeng smiled. He looked at him carefully, and there was a rare look in his eyes. There are indeed some small things. Shen Mu wants to get his wife back from the astral plane. For this, we have to kill the golden rock, and use his body to summon that woman. Li Yunxin raised his eyebrows. Then how do we kill him, and keep his body, and make sure that he doesn't destroy the world? Li Chunfeng raised his hand. Then I'll introduce you to an old friend. Chapter 819. Grandpa D, please show yourself. A man came out from behind the wooden screen in the northwest corner of the hall. He had blonde hair and blue eyes. He was indeed an old acquaintance of Li Yunxin. Grandpa D walked over slowly, and stared at Li Yunxin as he walked. He stopped 3 steps away from them and sneered. Li Yunxin. You didn't expect to see me here again, did you? Your treachery on the sea is not over. But Li Yunxin just looked at him expressionlessly. Li Chunfeng didn't say anything, and just stared at him. Grandpa D glared at him, and his chest rose, and fell a little faster. After another 2 breaths he said, Good, good, good. You're really a father and son soldier. Li Chunfeng, since you're so capable, I think you can do it without me. I'll take my leave now. He turned around and left after saying that. Li Yunxin didn't ask him to stay either. He just frowned and looked at Li Chunfeng. What are you doing? Li Chunfeng sighed and smiled helplessly. You didn't give him face. You've already agreed to let go of the past and cooperate with him this time. If you just nodded and smiled at him or greeted him, he wouldn't have been so embarrassed. Didn't you see how slow he was when he walked over? After all, he was already angry. Li Yunxin sneered. Him? Li Chunfeng smiled and shook his head. Fine. Then he stopped smiling, and turned to say in a deep voice, Grandpa D. Grandpa D walked to the stairs. Hearing his greeting, he stopped and turned around with a straight face. Don't be so shameless. Li Chunfeng looked at him. I said we'll talk about the inside story when my son comes. You should have heard it just now. Don't you realize that following him is the only way out? Do you want to die? When he heard the word son, Li Yunxin frowned. But when he heard what Grandpa D said next, he just opened his mouth and pouted, not saying a word. If he said those words, he would probably say something similar. Die. Grandpa D was completely infuriated. He slapped the handrail fiercely and it broke. The waiter on the 2nd floor hurriedly poked his head out to take a look. However, when he saw this force, he quickly retracted his hand and dodged far away. You think I haven't died before? Life in the astral plane is worse than death. He lowered his voice and shouted. Who do you think I am? My father was the god of the previous world. Do you know about the king of Pantheon? But now people like you. He took a few heavy breaths, and suddenly suppressed his anger. I'm talking to you because you've been kind to me before. Since that's the case, I'll just walk my own path. You can't leave. This is what I'm going to tell you next. Li Chunfeng said in a low voice. Do you think Cloud Mountain is protected and you can rush out without eating or drinking? Do you think you can bring fewer people? But there's something you're not clear about. Let me remind you, when did spiritual energy first appear? And when could it be used? Di Gongben took half a step forward but stopped again. What? Before this world there was a previous civilization. Li Chunfeng pointed to the sky. What power did they use then? You guys used Cloud Mountain as a relay station to obtain power from the astral plane, and put it into this world. At that time, Cloud Mountain was called the Star of the North Star. The supernatural power that came from it was called magic power. And the astral plane was called the magic net. Am I right? Then, that world was destroyed by Mother Earth. After Li Jun came here, there was spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Have you ever thought about how it came about? He pointed to the ground again. The power of the Earth's core and Mother Earth of the netherworld is powerful and violent. It's not something that the living beings in this world can use. Li Jun merged with Mother Earth and became a filter to suppress the violent power of the netherworld. Only then was the power that was filtered slowly dispersed into the world. With the spirit chi, the people in this world could make use of the chaotic laws to make use of the spirit chi. You didn't know this before, but I'll tell you now. Grandpa D was stunned. Li Yunxin was stunned too. But he wasn't stunned because of how the spiritual energy came about. He was stunned because of the person called Li Jun. He was curious about what kind of person could do so many things. But he didn't seem to think about himself at all. What was the purpose of this person living? Grandpa D frowned. So, what exactly do you want to say? What I want to say is that although Mother Earth of the netherworld is a great calamity in the world, she is also the source of life in the world. Before your world was destroyed, weren't all of the life forms in your world born from the ancient gods that Mother Earth had created? In essence, all the living beings in that world are a part of Mother Earth. It's still the same even now. Your exalted body is naturally very strong in this world. But have you ever thought that if you really ran out with Cloud Mountain, you would be isolated from this world by the chaotic world outside? Mother Earth's power, the so-called spiritual energy, and even the laws that use the spiritual energy to condense your body are all isolated? Your exalted body is refined from spiritual energy. It's only a short time, and the spiritual energy dissipates slowly, so it's not a big deal. But if you have to walk for a distance of 70 to 80,000 light years, even for 10 or 20,000 years, can you guarantee that your body won't collapse? When that time comes, you will find that your body is gone when you run out. The Martians who left first devoured all the resources in the galaxy along the way, and found that they were facing an empty area without even interstellar dust. Then in such an area, your field body that has been affected by the chaotic laws can't adapt to the uncorrupted world at all. Guess what will happen to you? Grandpa D was dumbfounded and speechless. Li Chunfeng let out a sigh of relief. Now come and sit down. Let's talk. Grandpa D took a few deep breaths. Finally, he walked over slowly, but didn't look at Li Yunxin. He only looked at Li Chunfeng. I'm not doing this for myself. It's also for the 400. Li Chunfeng smiled and pulled out the bench between the two of them. Sit. Only then did Grandpa D sit down slowly. Li Yunxin looked at him. Bro, there's nothing to be unhappy about when we're enemies. Grandpa D turned around and stared at him for a while. His expression gradually softened. Let's talk about the past later. Li Yunxin smiled and looked at Li Chunfeng. Tell me, what should I do? Ask Golden Rock to let down his guard first. You've already done some of this. For example, let Bai Yunxin go back and talk to him about what happened on the sea. Tell him that you'll go to the netherworld eventually. Li Chunfeng reached out and tapped on the table. I've also done some other things for you. Speaking of this, he paused and looked at Li Yunxin. Calm down and listen to me. Li Yunxin was stunned and then frowned. What did you do this time? I found Long Si and Lu Jun, and I tricked him to go to Golden Rock. Li Chunfeng pressed his hand down. Don't be impatient. I have my reasons for doing this. Li Yunxin stared at him without saying a word. Grandpa D seemed to be happy to see the situation between the two. He seized the time and sneered. Hey, you two have the same style of doing things. Li Yunxin, didn't you also use Lu Gongzan to help you in Yunshan? Like father, like son, like son, like father. I finally understand where you learned your ruthlessness. You. Li Yunxin raised a finger. Grandpa D suddenly closed his mouth and bit the tip of his tongue. It should have been broken, but Gran Shang's body was so strong that it didn't fall off. He only widened his eyes in pain and could only make muffled sounds. His body couldn't move at all, and beads of sweat oozed from his forehead. He rolled his eyes and looked at Li Chunfeng, but Li Chunfeng ignored him and only looked at Li Yunxin. He said slowly, "First, in a few days, Lu Jun will devour the ninth young master. I told him to join Golden Rock. Golden Rock will use the two people in his body to threaten you, so he won't do it. I'll protect the ninth young master's life first. Second, I have people around Golden Rock. You don't have to think too much. They are not Bai Yunxin or the evil spirit. They are just two demon kings. But I can also give some advice, so that Golden Rock won't harm the lives of Lu Gongzan and the ninth young master. With these two insurance, what you are worried about will not happen." Li Yunxin heaved a long sigh and looked at him gloomily. "Third, you can actually ask Lu Jun to come to me." Li Chunfeng shook his head. "Then it will be hard for Golden Rock. Maybe you will have a fierce battle with him. Compared to their lives, I care more about yours." So Golden Rock thinks that with these two people in his hands, and what Bai Yunxin said to him, he won't think that you are in danger. Li Chunfeng said in a low voice. "Next, do one more thing. Bai Yunxin will arrive at Shuanghu City soon. She loves you and you don't dislike her. You can ask Golden Rock to marry her to you. In Golden Rock's eyes, he will think that you are showing weakness because you are afraid of him. With this relationship of marriage, he will really think that you are going to go overseas. Then you can tell him to look at the sky and lead him to the sky. He will then realize that he has never had such a thought. As Lord Peng, once he realizes this, he will be more shocked than ordinary people like us. At this moment, the restriction you and I set up will take effect and Yunshan will launch a fatal attack. Then everything will be done." Li Yunxin was silent for a while. "Bai Yunxin can't do this." Li Chunfeng was stunned. "Huh, you can use tricks to determine who is better. This kind of trick makes me uncomfortable." Li Yunxin sneered. "Saying that you want to marry her and then kill her father? This kind of thing is despicable and different from flirting." Li Chunfeng raised his eyebrows and slowly leaned back in the chair. He exhaled softly. Then he looked at Grandpa D, who was sweating profusely, and smiled. "Fine. Then don't worry about her. But have you really chosen Li Xinyu? Does this have anything to do with your great cause of saving the world?" Li Yunxin said stiffly. "I'm just asking." Li Chunfeng smiled. "I used to think that if there is, then this is my private matter. We can sit down and talk, because we are talking about business." Li Yunxin looked calm, but he was not smiling like before. After Li Chunfeng said that he would use Lu Gongzan and the ninth young master as hostages. "Fine." Li Chunfeng sighed softly. He looked as if he had just seen Grandpa D. "What's wrong? Help him. I still have something to say to him." Li Yunxin moved his fingers. Grandpa D grunted and was about to stand up, but Li Chunfeng raised his hand slightly and pressed him down again. "Bro, a real man knows when to yield and when to stand tall. You don't have any divine power right now, and I'm only in the profound realm. If he wants to play tricks on you, I can't do anything about it. Let's talk business. Do you know how to make Cloud Mountain give a fatal blow?" Ever since he showed up, Grandpa D was like a balloon. He was so angry that he swelled up, but he was grabbed by someone else. His anger subsided a little, but he was immediately filled up. Now he was full, but he had no choice but to glare at Li Chunfeng and say through clenched teeth, "Back then, when I went to Cloud Mountain, you said that the flesh was magical. What did I do to you?" Li Chunfeng patted his shoulder thoughtfully and looked at Li Yunxin. "Grandpa D, don't talk so much." The Celestial, whose face was red with anger, took 2 deep breaths and then 2 more. "Magic paper, Xiesheng is spicy, Xiesheng is spicy." Li Yunxin looked at them. "So you still want Xiesheng? He knows how to activate Cloud Mountain's weapon system? Don't Chen Zhao and Li Zhen know?" Li Chunfeng shook his head. "Everyone has their own specialties. You can think of Chen Zhao as an analyst and Xiesheng as a mechanic. Cloud Mountain doesn't have a weapon system, but we can build one temporarily. Using it once is enough to deal with the Golden Rock." "Yes." Li Yunxin sneered. "Then this mechanic is really powerful. I've tortured him for decades, but he still hides something from me. Now I'm suddenly interested. I want to torture him slowly and see when I can squeeze out all his words." Li Chunfeng smiled. "It's not too late to try after you've used it. Indeed, we can't let him live. It seems that you formed an irreconcilable grudge with him. Grandpa D glared at them. He really wanted to say that the father and son were really a crooked beam. But the sharp pain at the tip of his tongue stopped him from speaking. He only cursed in his heart. But he already regretted letting Li Chunfeng go to Cloud Mountain a few days ago. He just wanted to see what he had to say. This was Li Yunxin's father, and the two didn't seem to be on good terms. He wanted to get some useful information from Li Chunfeng, but he didn't expect that Li Chunfeng wouldn't lose to Li Yunxin in terms of eloquence. He was soon convinced that he had found a better choice. Now he realized that meeting one of the two was already bad luck. But now he actually met two. He was really unlucky. He just wanted to end this quickly. No matter what he planned to do in the future, he had to get away from these two pests first. Just as he was thinking, he suddenly saw someone jump up from downstairs. The three of them had hidden their identities when they came here. They walked properly and spoke properly, but this person didn't seem to care about what the people on the street thought. Luckily, they were only on the 3rd floor. People who saw them would probably think that they had met a Jianghu swordsman with extraordinary kung fu. The three of them were familiar with each other. It was Bai Yunxin. She landed at the table and immediately looked at Li Yunxin. She carefully looked him up and down, as if there were many things she wanted to say in her eyes. In sharp contrast to the three people at the table, she looked happy. Then she looked at Li Chunfeng. This arrogant demon of the mysterious realm actually bowed to Li Chunfeng respectfully and said in a soft voice, "Mr. Li. Am I late?" Grandpa D felt goosebumps all over his body. Chapter 820. Li Chunfeng first glanced at Li Yunxin, who was staring at him, and then at Bai Yunxin. He smiled, stood up, and politely returned the greeting. "Miss Bai." Bai Yunxin hurriedly dodged and smiled. "Mr. Li, I can't accept your greeting." Seeing Li Yunxin's expression, Master D's face darkened. Li Chunfeng waved his hand again. "Miss Bai, please take a seat. How are you Meng and the others?" "They're all settled down." Bai Yunxin answered with a smile. "I bought a house for them in the city. The original owner was happy to entertain them. He also treated Demon Cat's injury. She's fine now." After saying this, she looked at Li Yunxin. "What are you talking about now?" Li Yunxin was about to speak, but Li Chunfeng said, "We're almost done. It's about the matter between the two of you." Yunxin said she has some ideas. Bai Yunxin was stunned and immediately said, "I don't have any ideas." Li Chunfeng smiled. "Oh, the names of the two of you. I mean Xiao Er." Li Yunxin glared at him, but he saw Li Chunfeng also winked at him. It seemed to be saying, "If you don't agree, then you talk to her." Bai Yunxin looked at the two of them, and their eyes turned into knives, spears, swords, and halberds. They talked back and forth on the table in silence. After 2 breaths, Li Yunxin stood up. "I have some ideas." He looked at Bai Yunxin. "Let's talk while we walk. Take me to see Yu Meng." After saying this, he stood up and walked away. After 2 steps, he turned around and threw a ball of green light to Li Chunfeng. "For you." It was none other than Xie Sheng's remnant soul. From the time they walked out of the restaurant to the time they walked on the crowded street, Li Yunxin didn't say anything. His face looked calm, as if he was thinking about something. Bai Yunxin could see this, so she didn't say anything. When she walked, she really looked like an ordinary girl in the human world. She was beautiful and dignified, attracting the attention of almost everyone on the road. But looking at the clothes and temperament of the people around her, he knew that these two people were either rich or noble, so they wouldn't come looking for trouble for a while. Just like that, they walked into a deserted alley. Only then did Li Yunxin stop under an old locust tree that had lost all its leaves. No matter what Li Chunfeng said to you before, what he promised you, you shouldn't trust him. Bai Yunxin was stunned. She still looked like an ordinary mortal woman. She looked up at him and asked, "Ah, didn't he tell you before that he might facilitate things between us?" Li Yunxin sighed. "There is one thing you may not know. Li Xinyu was saved by me." Bai Yunxin slowly furrowed her brows. "What does this have to do with anything?" "He wanted to use our relationship to make your foster father lower his guard." Li Yunxin looked at her and said seriously, "Then he planned to get rid of him." As for marrying you and becoming in-laws, it was all a cover. I didn't want to do it, so I told you. After a few breaths, a veil seemed to be removed from Bai Yunxin's face. It was the veil that made her look gentle and peaceful, like a mortal woman. A gust of wind suddenly rose on the street, swirling and sweeping away the dust and dead leaves. Bai Yunxin slowly widened her eyes. Li Xingyu is just an obsession. Huh. She's a ghost cultivator, just an obsession. The female monster's breathing became heavy. She doesn't know what she wants at all. If she hadn't met you, she would have fallen in love with another strong, good-looking demon. She doesn't like you. You're a smart person, don't you know that? Li Yunxin sighed. Now we're talking about Li Chuanfeng's plot against your foster father. You think he doesn't know? Bai Yunxin said angrily. But he doesn't care. Chen Zhao won't let anything happen to my foster father, no matter what Li Chunfeng wants to do. Li Yunxin was taken aback. Did your foster father tell you something else? When they were trapped in Hatred's palace in Mount Manwan, they had speculated about the relationship between the Golden Rock, Shinryu, and the art saint in a room. But at that time, their knowledge was limited, and they didn't get the right answer. Even Bai Yunxin took a wrong turn. But now, from what she said, she seemed to have a clear understanding of the cause and effect between the three. He told me after he got out. Bai Yunxin stared at Li Yunxin. My father was acting with Chen Zhao. She paused and suddenly asked a seemingly irrelevant question. Do you know why he and my mother gave birth to me? Without waiting for Li Yunxin to answer, she continued. Because my mother looks like Chen Zhao. Do you understand? They had a relationship, and my father still hasn't forgotten her. So you think Chen Zhao will definitely protect your father's life? Li Yunxin frowned slightly, thinking of what Li Chunfeng had said to him before. The plans and things they had discussed today were all told by him to pass on to the underground world. Was it because of this? Chen Zhao really had feelings for the Golden Rock, and Li Chunfeng knew it. So he asked him to say it himself? But according to what Taoist Qing Shui said, and what happened to Shinryu, the affectionate, Chen Zhao didn't seem to be real. On the contrary, Chen Zhao seemed to be affectionate but ruthless. He let out a sigh. Why are you telling me this? Isn't that what you care about? Bai Yunxin stared into his eyes. You feel that being with me is tied to your father's scheme against my father. So you feel that this relationship is not pure, and you are being used. But now you should know that what happened between us has nothing to do with my father and your father. My father doesn't care. Li Yunxin was silent for a while and smiled. So that's how it is. But it's not because of this. His tone became calmer and gentler. You know, I'm not a person who can be easily influenced by other things and factors. The obstacle between us isn't what you're talking about. It's, when you said these words, your motive itself. What? What motive? Li Yunxin thought about it seriously and said, I know you like me, but there's something else in your love for me. You're rational. You think about yourself, the people behind you, and the situation around you. Whether it was when you left with the evil spirit at the foot of Yunshan, or when I asked you to leave on the sea. You asked me to leave. Bai Yunxin glared at him. You asked me to leave. When I was at the foot of Yunshan, I had to go back. My father was about to wake up. I also had to prevent my mother from doing anything to you. I also wanted to tell my father not to do anything to you after he woke up. Don't. But Li Xingyu won't leave. Li Yunxin interrupted her calmly. She will definitely choose to stay by my side. I know what you mean. You consider the situation and the overall situation. You stand at a higher position and think for me. You also have a longer view. But Li Xingyu only has one obsession. She only has me in her eyes. For the sake of me, she doesn't think about the future or plans. Ask a normal person to say who is better between the two of you. Everyone will say it's you. You're much more rational than her. Since you know that you. But I'm not a normal person. Li Yunxin spread out his hands. Look at me. Don't you know me well enough? I'm insecure and selfish. I don't want rational love and affection. I just want a person to give to me without any purpose or intention. Only such a person can make me feel at ease. Even if that person isn't rational enough, can't do anything big, can't think far, it will still make me feel at ease. Yes, you want to say, which love and affection in the world doesn't have some rationality. I also know that the so-called liking and love should be mutual giving by two people. It's very unreasonable to ask one person to sacrifice for the other. But I'm such an unreasonable person. I used to think that I might like interesting souls. But after these things, I realized that if a person has an interesting soul but is rational, I will be afraid of her. I will have a hard time scheming against her, understanding her and guarding against her. If one day her rationality tells her to do something else, tells her to hurt and betray me, how will I be hurt? I know myself. Li Yunxin smiled. I will definitely hurt others. Even those who love me to the point of being rational will be hurt because of this one day. In fact, I also want to ask you, why do you like me? Li Yunxin looked at her. You saved me from the beginning. After that, I didn't do many things for you. Why do you like me? Is it because when we first met, did you feel there was a fragrance in my soul? Or is it because the only person in the world who is worthy of you, who doesn't make you feel bored, is me? If that's the case, how different is your love for me and Li Xianyu's obsession? Bai Yunxin took a step back slowly and shook her head in disbelief. I understand. Whether it's me or Li Xianyu, you've never cared about anyone. You're just like an evil ghost learning to be a human. You're pretending to like her. You don't know what you like about her, and what you like about me. I should have known. Li Yunxin thought for a while but still smiled. I see. Then you're right. Or, you can think like this. I'm an evil ghost. I'm learning to be a human. I've never loved anyone before, so I don't know what love feels like. So, I want to give it a try. What I want is the taste of it, not the person. So, it's best not to call someone I'm afraid of. I can try and have a taste. Even if one day I fail and want to leave, I won't worry about the person resenting me because of her rationality. She will probably still treat me well. Bai Yunxin sneered. Shameless. Li Yunxin said calmly. I've never denied my shamelessness. And what if I succeed? He looked at Bai Yunxin. So, if you know what I'm thinking, do you still dare to be with me? The banshee frowned and thought for a while. Li Yunxin smiled again. Li Xianyu won't think about it. Now do you understand? Bai Yunxin's aura slowly receded. The chilly wind at the corner of the street also gradually disappeared. She took 2 steps back, and her voice was no longer angry. It doesn't matter whether I understand or not. Maybe you're right, I have to be rational. For example, I want to ask you now. Li Chunfeng wanted to harm my father. Since you planned to refuse me, you should have known that I would hate you because of this. Why did you tell me? That's not how you do things. Li Yunxin thought for a moment and let out a long sigh. My style? I don't even know what my style is. If you think that I'm good at scheming and think that's my style, it means that you don't know me very well. In fact, what I like the most is not hiding in the dark and shooting, but fighting with my bare arms. But in the past I could easily be killed by others if I did that, so I had to use some less exciting methods. But now, I'm already the supreme. The only one who can be my opponent on the land is probably your father. Do you think I'll want to test my strength? You mean you're challenging my father to a duel? Bai Yunxin's voice became calmer and calmer. She controlled her anger very well. Chen Zhao did not know if she suppressed it, or if it had really disappeared. It's not that I have to fight. If he's willing to give up his body, because Li Chunfeng thinks that what he wants is related to the survival of the world, and Chen Zhao's. If he really has feelings for Chen Zhao, he might give up himself for Chen Zhao. He won't make it difficult for her to choose between keeping him or killing him. Bai Yunxin sneered. She was no longer as infatuated as before. Then aren't you worried about Lu Gongzan and Zhouer's safety? You'll take good care of them, Li Yunxin said. Hami. Bai Yunxin laughed mockingly. Now do you know how Yu Meng and the others got their house? No one would be willing to give up their house, especially one that young master Yu feels comfortable with. I'm guessing you killed everyone in the room. The dead won't object. Li Yunxin shook his head. What are you trying to say? You kill without batting an eye. But I know you're a good girl. If you hate me, you won't take it out on old Lu and Zhouer. Bai Yunxin was so angry that she laughed. How can you be so sure? Because your mate has been with you for a long time. Li Yunxin sighed. When you were lonely, you chased after Jiu and said that you wanted to eat him. But you didn't really eat him. You went up to Cloud Mountain a few times to ask for the feather robe. But the cultivators from Xianmen didn't really kill you or imprison you. Not only because your father is the Rock King, but also because you didn't go overboard. You don't treat mortals as people, because you don't think they're the same kind. But it's different for demons. A woman who kills a goose with a smile might be a kind girl. Bai Yunxin was silent for a while. Suddenly 2 drops of tears fell. Li Yunxin, I hate you, she said. Then she turned into a gust of demonic wind, lifting the roofs of the houses on the side of the street, and soaring into the sky. Li Yunxin raised her hand to rub her face, and stepped into the alley. Chapter 821. The demon ran away angrily, and didn't say where Yu Meng was. But when Li Yunxin was on the street, he saw a big house in the northwest of the city. The restaurant was 3 stories high, and was one of the tallest buildings in the city. But there was a 4-story turret in the northwest. It looked extraordinary from afar. Based on the direction he was walking in, he deduced that it was where Yu Meng was. He passed through the streets and alleys and realized that he was right. It wasn't a temple, but a private house. It looked majestic, and the street in front of the house was clean and quiet. This should be the rich district of Shuanghu City. He walked through the wall without hesitation, because the size of this house was very similar to the original house of the Yu family in Weiqing City. The high walls almost took up an entire street. If he knocked on the door and waited for someone to open the door, he didn't know how long he would have to wait. Besides, the original people in the house were all killed by Bai Yunxin, so there shouldn't be any news. But when he really stepped into the house, the first person he saw was a person. Many people, male servants and maids, carrying all kinds of fruits and snacks, hurried back and forth on the garden path. They didn't say a word. It seemed that the owner of the house had ordered them not to disturb the peace. He could tell at a glance that these were indeed people, not demons or ghosts. Looking further into the distance, next to a pool of water, there was a reclining chair on the newly sprouted grass. A person was lying on the chair, covered with a brocade quilt. He seemed to be resting with his eyes closed. There were 2 pretty maids beside him. One was massaging his shoulders and legs, and the other was directing the servants to place the food. His voice was also very low. Li Yunxin could understand this behavior. It was a chilly spring, and the house had to be heated. Therefore, it was not easy to breathe. So he ran out, and enjoyed the fresh air of early spring while drinking hot tea under the quilt. It was similar to turning the air conditioner to 16 degrees, and then covering himself with a quilt in the summer in his world. But didn't he kill them all? He frowned and walked over to Yu Meng's side. The girl massaging his shoulders and legs was Lily, and the one directing the servants was Wu Su. Back in Changji town, the one who was killed by golden light with a single sword strike was the former. But now, he looked no different from an ordinary person, as if he had used some kind of method to recuperate. As soon as he appeared, the 2 girls jumped in fright. The servants, on the other hand, were very careful when they approached their master. They lowered their heads and did not dare to casually look at him, so they did not see how Li Yunxin had arrived. But both of them didn't have a bad impression of Li Yunxin. They also knew that he had supernatural powers. After a moment of shock, they regained their senses and called out in unison, "Priestly!" Li Yunxin smiled. "I'm not a Taoist priest. I am a demon. You might as well call me Young Master Li." The 2 sweetly called out again, "Young Master Li." The servants at the side looked at each other, unsure if the demon this person was talking about was real or not. Things were different now than they were in the past. Demons do exist, this kind of thing. Everybody in the world already knew. At this moment Wu Su ordered, "All of you are dismissed. Tell your master that my young master is meeting an important guest, and will not see any other guests for the time being." The servants hurriedly complied and quickly retreated. Yu Meng then looked up at Li Yunxin, but he was still lying on the chair. "I heard that you have been doing well recently, and are already an extraordinary person." Li Yunxin smiled. "It's just your previous realm. Wu Su, have you recovered?" Rock King helped. Yu Meng said. You can say that. Wu Su's face became gloomy. Li Yunqing glanced at her, then looked at Yu Meng. Only then did he notice that under the blanket on the chair, there was an empty leg, and on the other side of the chair, there was a wooden fake leg. He bent down and pressed. He found that Yu Meng's left leg was broken, but the wound had already healed. At this moment he heard Lily say, "Young Master Li, please persuade my young master." Li Yunqing understood what was going on. On the night he helped Red Madam reconstruct her body, he had thought of this method, using his own flesh and blood to do this. This involved some difficult-to-explain principles. There should be an answer, but because of the attitude of the Taoist sects in this world, if you know how, then don't bother to know why, it became a muddle. Using flesh and blood to reconstruct the body was easier, and less likely to go wrong than using ordinary methods. Moreover, the reconstructed body was more like a human, if the practitioner's level of cultivation was not high. As for the method he used, it was naturally more brilliant than the ordinary method. But the problem was, although he had been immersed in painting for many years, and should be more familiar with the construction of the body than Golden Rock, Lord Rock had lived longer than him. There was no reason to use Yu Meng's flesh and blood to reconstruct Wu Su's body. Li Yunqing frowned. What happened? Yu Meng raised his hand. At that time, you were entangled and couldn't get away. I wanted to find someone else to help. After thinking about it, only Golden Rock could do it. So I went to find him. Bai Yunqing did me a favor and spoke up for me. So he used my flesh and blood to reconstruct his body. He said this lightly, but Li Yunqing knew that the process was extremely difficult. At that time, he really couldn't help Yu Meng. He was only in the mysterious realm. He sighed. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about why you used this method. Why do you have to do this? You're not the Grand Elder now. It's not difficult to ask him to get you a leg. Yu Meng smiled. Since you're the Grand Elder now, you should be able to see more. For example, karma and karma. Wu Su lost her life because of me. I should pay her back. Wu Su raised his sleeve and wiped the corner of his eyes. Li Yunqing sighed. I understand. You should pay her back. But why do you have to limp? She'll be sad to see you like this every day. People who don't know you might think you want to use this to sell her favor. We've always remembered young master's kindness, we can't forget it. Young master doesn't mean that. Lily said. Yu Meng smiled. Young masterly doesn't mean that either. Go get me a heater. Let's talk. And call the sheriff. Wu Su and Lily hesitated for a while, then slowly walked away. Then they turned around and said, Young masterly, you have to persuade my young master. Li Yunqing nodded. After they walked some distance away, Yu Meng said seriously, I don't want to owe Golden Rock a favor. What do you mean? You should know what kind of opportunity the Golden Rock had to become a Grand Supreme. It's because of the Heavenly Heart Law. I used to be the leader of the Celestial Sect. Now I'm asking him for a favor. It's a bit far-fetched to explain this in the secular world, but you should be able to understand. Li Yunqing thought for a while. I understand. Ask him to help you, but use your flesh and blood. Don't use his things. We don't owe each other anything, but you didn't want Golden Rock's help. Now I can help you. Yu Meng smiled lazily. It's also because I know there will be a battle between you and Golden Rock. All the more I don't owe him a favor. Speaking of which, do you know how I got here? Li Yunqing was slightly stunned. Not owing him a favor because he and Golden Rock were bound to fight. Coming from Yu Meng's mouth, these words should be true. He was a little absent-minded, even though it was only for a short while. In his list of people closest to him, Yu Meng's name was not included, but now, he actually saw himself as a friend. He didn't know what caused this. Or rather, after he searched through their past experiences and interactions, he didn't feel that he had ever provided any benefits for him. No, it had nothing to do with benefits. Li Yunqing sighed in his heart. Maybe seeing someone pleasing to the eye, and treating him as a friend for no reason. This kind of Jianghu legend was true. It was just that he was still unable to truly comprehend this feeling at the moment. He hoped that one day he would understand. There seemed to be too many things he couldn't understand. So he smiled and skipped this thought. Did Bai Yunqing bring you here? She brought me here. Yu Meng nodded slightly and picked a grape from the small table next to him. He didn't know where he got this grape from in this season. I was worried that she would kill someone. I know her temper. She never sees people as her own kind. Coincidentally, I also know the owner of this house. He used to be friends with my family. He did business. It wasn't as big as my family, but it wasn't small either. Now my family is gone, but my connections and channels are still there. Maybe because of this, he treated us quite well. So I told Bai Yunxin not to hurt him. The demoness actually agreed immediately. She said that since you don't like her killing people, let him go. Yu Meng pinched the grape and thought for a while. He retracted his hand into the quilt and looked at Li Yunxin. When she said that, her expression and tone were unusual. I guess she fell in love with you. I also know that you two used to have a lot of connections. So I don't know, what are you going to do to Rock King? It's just her wishful thinking. Li Yunxin sighed. I told her everything before I came here. As for Rock King, it's not about what I want to do to him. It's about me needing someone to protect me. I don't want another uncontrollable powerful being to appear in the Midland. Based on these 2 points, he has to die. Yu Meng thought for a while and suddenly said, Li Chunfeng told me to persuade you to do as he said. From the looks of it, do you have another way? Li Yunxin wasn't surprised at all. His father was actually very similar to him. He would never let go of any possibility. He must have met Yu Meng before he came to Shuanghu City. He thought that Yu Meng's persuasion might have some effect, even if it was only a little. So he told Yu Meng his plan. Li Chunfeng might have a lot of detestable aspects in other areas, but he was definitely a cautious person. So Li Yunxin smiled and didn't hide it from him. From a rational point of view, his plan is brilliant, but it's too despicable. Yu Meng twitched the corner of his mouth. Li Yunxin spread her hands. What? Pretending to marry someone's daughter, and then killing her father? Then you might have to imprison or seal the daughter. Can you accept this? Yu Meng said, yes. So what are you going to do? I'll fight with him. Li Yunxin said seriously. Before I came here, it was just an idea. But after hearing your evaluation of him, I think my plan can be implemented. If I lose, I'll find another way. If he loses, he'll give me his body, and I'll protect his soul. The current situation isn't good for him. I guess he won't dare to go back on his word. A mysterious smile appeared on Yu Meng's face again. Li Yunxin frowned. What are you smiling at? I understand. Yu Meng said with a smile. You have another plan. Right now it's just a cover-up. Speaking of this, I'm really curious. How are you going to plot against the real Grand Supreme Master? After all, your cards are on the table. I'm serious. Li Yunxin said seriously. I want to fight to my heart's content. Let's have a decisive battle on the top of the Forbidden City. Let's have a showdown between masters. It's also a wish. Yu Meng just smiled. The most interesting thing is that even I know this is not your style. Jin Peng and Bai Yunxin should know better. You put out this cover, and they will see through it at a glance. Then they will wonder why you said and did this. So you plan to use this method to disturb Jin Peng's mind, forcing him to be cautious and not dare to harm Lu Gongzan and the 9th young master? Then ask him to invest a lot of energy and attention in the easy to think of things. And then you attack him unexpectedly like before? Li Yunxin sighed and did not speak. Yu Meng smiled. Okay, I won't guess. He pointed to his broken leg again. The reason why I didn't make a new one for myself is that I don't want to get involved in these things anymore. And I don't want to deal with any supernatural powers. I just want to be an ordinary person in this life, a rich and happy ordinary person. So what's the big deal about losing a leg? After all, I have someone to take care of me. Li Yunxin looked at him. Are you serious? The 2 little girls will not have an easy time. I'm looking for a house. Yu Meng said, Shuanghu City is not bad. I plan to live here. When the house arrives, I will marry the 2 of them and make them my second wives. Li Yunxin shook his head. You Xianmen sages are really interesting. You just want to be immortal and don't want to care about the world. As for the other 2, they want to cultivate their feelings again. In the end, you are all running away from the past, and we have to clean up the mess for you. Yu Meng smiled. I helped you take care of the cat demon, and you do one more thing for me. Then I can really draw a line between you and me. You don't have to worry about the world calamity. Being a free rich man is much more interesting than being a Xianmen sage. Li Yunqi nodded. What's the matter? Tell me. Make me rich for a lifetime. It's not troublesome. Just a few decades. I want to be rich. Li Yunqi thought for a while. Making you rich and not asking you to cause trouble. It's much more difficult than asking you to cultivate for a long time. Okay, I'll promise you this. As he said this, he saw a black shadow rushing over from afar. The voice sounded like it was crying. Your Majesty. Chapter 822. Before he could react, he was hugged by the cat spirit. The cat spirit rubbed against Li Yunqin's chest, chin, and neck as soon as she was in his arms. Luckily, her hair was tied up in a bun. Otherwise, the jewelry she wore would have been rubbed into gold and silver foil. But it wasn't a cat. It was a living, beautiful woman. Just like a pheasant used to get up early, a cat still had the habit of being coquettish. Her delicate body wriggled in Li Yunqin's arms. Those who did not know her real body might think she was a snake spirit. Li Yunqin was confused by her enthusiasm. In the past, the cat spirit liked to wink at him occasionally. She was the boldest and the most lively one among the four monsters. But now, because they had been separated for so long, she was much bolder than before. He just stroked her hair and said softly, Okay. Yu Meng looked at them and coughed. Okay, you guys take your time to catch up. I won't disturb you. After saying this, she lifted the quilt, took out her fake leg and skillfully put it back on. Then she stood up and walked out of the garden. She could move freely. She didn't look like she was disabled at all. Li Yunqin remembered that she used to be a top master in the secular world. It seemed that there was no need to make another leg. Maybe she could make an iron leg in the future and float on the water. After Yu Meng left, the cat spirit left him. She looked up at him and blinked. Suddenly the sweetness faded away. My king, did you see Bai Yunqin? Li Yunqin was surprised. Huh. The cat spirit looked back. I was worried about him. Then she pulled Li Yunqin's hand and put her body on his arm. But I was really happy to see you. Li Yunqin smiled. You little vixen. You also know how to put on an act. What's wrong? Why are you worried about him? He was chatting happily with Golden Rock in the Mocking Heavens Palace. The cat demon blinked. The Mocking Heavens Palace, Great King, is where the Golden Rock lives. I stayed there for a few days, and the Golden Rock wanted to adopt me as his daughter, but I ignored him. Li Yunqin was stunned. You've been in contact with Golden Rock? Does he like you? That's exactly what I wanted to tell the king. I think you'll definitely need it. The cat demon squinted happily. Yu Meng brought us to the Heaven Mocking Palace. I thought it was a good opportunity to take a closer look. If the Great King were to fight with the Golden Rock in the future, it would be good to know what kind of person he is. Li Yunqin rubbed her head. Thank you. The cat demon laughed even more happily after being praised. Your Majesty, you must not know that the Golden Rock is an old pervert. Li Yunqin was intrigued. What do you mean? These words had indeed piqued his interest. He had been surprised when he found out that Bai Yunqin's mother was the evil spirit. But now that he thought about it, it did not seem to be unacceptable. Although the evil spirit was born by Shinryu and the Golden Rock, it was not the kind of birth in the human world. Instead, the evil spirit was split from the spirit. Moreover, it was a demon, so it was normal that it did not care about human ethics. Therefore, it was not strange that the Golden Rock adopted the evil spirit and gave birth to Bai Yunqin. After all, there were many things in the human world that were more abnormal than this. But later on, he always announced that Bai Yunqin was his adopted daughter. Maybe it was because he still had some scruples about human relations. But before this, on the street, Bai Yunqin told him that the Golden Rock adopted the evil spirit because it looked like Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao created Shinryu for himself, so it was normal that she looked like him. Shinryu and the Golden Rock then created the evil spirit, so it was normal that the evil spirit looked like Shinryu. For Chen Zhao's plan to kill Shinryu, The golden rock was willing to cooperate with her, and sealed himself for 1,000 years. If such a sacrifice could be explained by the fact that he loved Chen Zhao, it would make sense. But Li Yunqin frowned. What kind of person was Chen Zhao? He read the translucent jade scroll, and felt that this person was quite normal. He had great love, and could not stand injustice. According to his impression from the world he came from, this kind of person was probably a righteous and decent person. He did not want to criticize other people's private lives. After all, he often played with people's hearts and emotions. But the problem was that he only played with people's hearts and emotions. This art saint seemed to have gone a little overboard. To make the golden rock, who had seen the world so loyal to him, Li Yunqin could not imagine how deep the relationship between the two was. After all, there was also the Lord Dongting, who knew whether the one he loved was Xinryu or Chen Zhao. There was also the Taoist Qing Shui. Oh, there was also Shin Mu. For the first time, he felt that the view of love of the spaceship civilization's astronauts was indeed a little strange. Seeing that he was interested in this matter, the cat demon was even happier. When she spoke, she was very lively as if she was telling a story. My king, do you know that Bai Yunqin is not the Golden Rock's adopted daughter, but his biological daughter? She was born from the evil spirit who was pregnant with Baizhen. My God, the evil spirit is also the Golden Rock's daughter. He actually had a daughter with his daughter. Hearing this, Li Yunqin looked around. The snacks and fruits that Yu Meng had placed here when he was relaxing were still there. He walked 2 steps and sat on the chair that Yu Meng had been lying on. He grabbed a handful of sunflower seeds and said, Bai Yunqin said that it was because the Golden Rock loved the art saint, and the evil spirit looked like the art saint. That's why they loved each other. The cat demon did not spend as much time with Li Yunqin as the pheasant. Therefore, she was not as familiar with Li Yunqin as the chicken demon. Ru Jian saw that Li Yunqin was listening to her for a long time, so she was very happy. She casually swept away all the food that she did not like from the small square table, and sat down as well. Her beautiful golden eyes widened, and her pupils shrank into a line. My king, you don't know. How is this the reason? I stayed in the Temple of Mockery for more than 10 days. The Golden Rock liked me, so he allowed me to move around freely. I heard him tell the 3 female demons that I looked like Chen Zhao, and then he did that thing. She pointed at herself and said, he also said that my nose looked like Chen Zhao's. He nagged me about a lot of things, but I was too lazy to care about him. Then he said that he wanted to adopt me as his daughter, but I was too lazy to care about him. Li Yunqin ate 2 melon seeds and thought for a while. What kind of person is the Golden Rock? Not as beautiful as my king. The cat demon also thought for a while. He said that he was an old man, but he was not very old. He said that he was a young man, but he was a little older. Looking at his appearance, I can't tell how old he looked. But anyway, if I had to say, I would say that he was an uncle. Li Yunqin nodded slightly. What about his personality? He was an old pervert. He always talked with a smile, but it was not the kind of smile that other demons had. It looked like he was really smiling. He also wouldn't kill people while smiling. When he really wanted to kill someone, he would put on a straight face and say that the person had done something wrong. The cat demon frowned. But he was not an easygoing person either. I stayed for more than 10 days, and I saw him kill 3 people. 2 of them seemed to be incompetent, and I don't know why the last one was. He looked like a person. Li Yunqin nodded again. What did he say to you? About Chen Zhao? When Yu Meng brought the cat demon to the heaven-mocking palace where the Golden Rock lived, he should have just arrived at the sea. Shi's mysterious realm did not have much of an advantage, but according to the cat demon, the Golden Rock was very nice to her. This could not be explained by Yu Meng's saying that he owed the fruit of fate. There must be a reason for this. It was not because he was afraid of the cat demon's master, but because of something else. He said that he and the art saint were so congenial and in love with each other. He also said that the art saint had gone underground for some reason, so he was left to guard the world above, so that nothing would happen to the world. When he said that, he looked like he was about to cry, as if he was sincere. But my king, don't be fooled by him. He always acts like this when he says this to everyone. He also said that when he saw me, he thought of Qining. He also said that it was not because I looked like him that he wanted to be a substitute, but because of this, the two of them were fated. It could be considered a memorial for that dead relationship. The cat demon shrunk her neck as she spoke. It's so disgusting. I ran away quickly. Li Yunxin pinched a seed and peeled it slowly. A thought came to him. Bai Yunxin said that the golden rock was not worried about being killed, because he felt that Chen Zhao would protect him. He also felt that the golden rock was willing to do so many things for Chen Zhao, because they had a close relationship in the past. The cat demon also said that the golden rock was an old pervert, who could not forget Chen Zhao. He also really had a child with the evil lord who looked like Chen Zhao. He should be able to tell from this information that the Rock King was indeed deeply in love with Chen Zhao. Then, why did that old thing tease the cat demon like he was playing? Because he was Chen Zhao's new favorite, and worked for them above ground. So he felt neglected and abandoned. That's why. This kind of deduction made sense for ordinary people. But it didn't make sense for the Golden Rock. Chen Zhao was a smart person. The Golden Rock, who could work with a smart person like him, and was told the inside story, should also be a smart person. Now the smart Golden Rock was facing a challenge. There was another Grand Supreme on Midland, who could shake his position. In his opinion, this person had also gained Chen Zhao's favor, and had the intention to replace him. If Li Yunxin was the Golden Rock, he would have to worry about his own life. Chen Zhao even killed the Shinryu, not to mention the Golden Rock. Moreover, she had been underground for many years without any news. She might change her mind again. He would not be like the Golden Rock, who felt that Chen Zhao will definitely protect my life. He should try to contact Chen Zhao again, and find out what was going on. At the same time, he would prove to Chen Zhao that he was more useful than that person. But this was not easy to achieve. Li Yunxin could stand out mainly because of his background. This kind of halo was something the Golden Rock could not learn. If this did not work, then he might as well be more thorough. He would kill all those who walked on the land and worked for the underground. Chen Zhao had no one to use, so he had to rely on him. At least the Golden Rock, who did not know more about the inside story, should think so. Then, whether it was his various behaviors or the information he had revealed to him through Bai Yunxin, they were all to make him feel that, because of Chen Zhao, he did not want to shed all pretense of cordiality with him. The new nobleman? Previously, he had sent the Lord of the Night and the Lord of the Clouds to the city of Wei to make him know that he was unwilling. Then, he used these things to make Chen Zhao lower his guard and cover up his killing intent. When Li Yunxin thought of this, he sighed in his heart. He was busy saving the world, but he had to think about these things and play house with the Golden Rock. What a small world. As for Chen Zhao, he did not seem to be as smart as he thought. He had first created a Shinryu, but in the end, he could not get rid of her. He could only rely on the Golden Rock to solve the problem. Now he had left the Grand Supreme Golden Rock, which was also a problem. Seeing that he did not say anything, the cat demon thought that he was listening attentively. Then, he excitedly talked about the layout and decoration of the heaven-mocking palace, and so on. Then, he talked about the interesting things he had seen, but he did not know if he added details. Finally he said, "So I thought that the Golden Rock was very polite to you, Meng. Maybe the two of them were scheming something. I pretended that I was not feeling well, and could only tell you when I saw the king." "King, Bai Yunxin said that she wanted to marry you. I was afraid that she wanted to harm you." Li Yunxin only smiled. "You don't have to worry about her. There is no possibility." But in his heart, he was thinking, if the Golden Rock really had the idea of killing all the people on the ground and forcing Chen Zhao to respect him again, what would he do? Chapter 823. He felt it was time to talk to Qining. At this moment, the cat demon rolled his eyes and played with the teacup on the table next to him with one finger. He played with the teacup on the table and spun it, then dropped it on the ground and broke it. Then he said, "My king Yu. I saved Li Xinyu. She lives outside the city of Wei now. You can go back to the city of Wei to find Shanji. Sanhua is also there. Li Yunxin said. Shuanghu City may not be safe. You can go back to help Shanji if you leave earlier. Even if you don't like to work, it's good to have some fun. The cat demon sighed with disappointment. He fiddled with several things on the table and said, My king, you are different from before. Li Yunxin smiled. For the better or for the worse? The cat demon stared at him carefully for a while. More like a human. I used to be a human. That's a good thing. Li Yunxin was silent for a while. She seemed to have thought of something before saying, Let's go. I have to get down to business. If it goes well, I will see you in a month. After saying this, he disappeared from the courtyard. The next moment, he reappeared in the restaurant where he talked with Li Chunfeng. He had left for less than an hour, but it was still empty when he came back. Master Di was not there. Only Li Chunfeng was sitting by the window with a cup of wine in his hand. He was not surprised to see him reappear in the hall. He just sighed. I guess you told Bai Yunxin what we are going to do? Li Yunxin walked to the window and put his hands on the railing. He looked at the street and said, I didn't agree to it from the beginning. It's not what I am going to do. I told you everything. To what extent? I told you that you wanted me to marry her just to make Golden Rock lower his guard, so that you could kill him. Bai Yunxin has already left. She should have brought the message. Li Chunfeng drank up the wine in his cup, shook his head and poured himself another cup. You should know that it will be a big variable. If you fight against him, no matter who wins or loses, all living beings in the Midland will suffer, all for your pleasure. Is this appropriate? That's why I want to talk to Chening. Listen to what she says. You should know how to contact her. Li Chunfeng was silent for a moment, then drank 3 more cups. Li Yunxin turned to look at him, and found that his face was slightly red. From this, one could tell that he must have dispersed his supernatural power, and experienced the state of being drunk or tipsy like a normal person. He would occasionally do such things himself. When you were born, I already knew that you weren't an ordinary person. Li Chunfeng suddenly said something irrelevant. Most of the time, you try to restrain your overly mature actions and thoughts. But there are also many times when you do show interest in this world like a newborn child. The longer I observe you, the more curious I am about what kind of person you were in the past. But even though I know you have a past, I often really treat you as a child. Many of the things I've said and done to you before weren't just an act. A lot of them were genuine. Now think about it. You should realize that apart from teaching you some cultivation methods, I didn't try to interfere with or guide your thoughts, Li Chunfeng said in a low voice. First, it's because you're not a real child, and your mind isn't a blank piece of paper. I taught you how to think, but it's hard for you to accept it. Even if you accept it, there are still some other things hidden in your heart, which makes it even harder for me to know what you're thinking. Also, it's because I like your character. You're thoughtful and organized. You're the kind of person I want. Li Yunxin didn't interrupt him, but just listened quietly. When Li Chunfeng said this, he asked calmly, Why are you telling me this now? Because this time, after you came back to the Midland, you did different things. You helped Li Xinyu and Shanji settle down. Then you looked at Yu Meng and that little cat spirit. Didn't you realize it? You're like a parent now. You're trying your best to think about the children. Li Chunfeng reached out his hand and touched the wine pot, as if he was considering whether he should drink another cup. But in the end, he pushed the pot away a little bit, and only put his hand on the table. I wanted to do this kind of thing before. Shang Guanyu. When I met her in Cloud Mountain, my eyes lit up. She should be the noblest person in the world. She's from this world. But she's pure, kind, and beautiful. She hasn't become like those lifeless cultivators. So I brought her out. I felt that experiencing some beautiful feelings in between the things I had to do would make the world a little more interesting. It wasn't a dark, uncertain world that might really be heading towards the end of the road. After that, I went to Dingzhou with her, and I really felt like the sea and the sky. I could finally free myself from the suffocating atmosphere of the Xianmen sect. My life was quite leisurely. But after that, you were in her body. Do you know how I felt? Li Chunfeng smiled. I even thought about killing you. Because before you were born, I was still thinking that maybe I could have a child in this world, and then I would really experience the feeling of being a human. Li Yunqin looked at him. You've lived for so long, but you've never had other children? I'm not a human. I've lived for a long time, but I've learned. Over the years, I've gradually learned. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this relationship. Then, Li Yunqin thought for a moment. Later, you two faked your deaths and left because you made a decision in your heart? At that time, yes. Li Chunfeng shook his head slightly. You gradually grew up. Your background and family allowed you to show a maturity that didn't match a child of that age. But at the same time, it didn't arouse suspicion. The child of two cultivators. No matter how smart he was, it wouldn't arouse suspicion. So, I also realized that the play of a kind father and filial son might not be able to continue soon. You didn't know anything about me when you were born, but I knew what you might be like. But as you slowly learned more and thought more, with your mind one day, you would realize that there was something wrong with me. I didn't want to wait until that day came. Li Yunqin shook his head. If I had waited until that day, maybe it wouldn't be the situation now. The reason why I don't like you now is not because you hid a lot of things from me from the beginning. You know, I also hid a lot from you. It's because you faked your death. I used to like the first 10 years very much. I thought that you were a good father. Shangguan, you could be considered a good mother. My parents were healthy. I didn't have to worry about food and clothing, and I could experience some magical things. I was very satisfied with this kind of life. So I paid a lot of feelings for the first time. But later, you played the game of disappearing, consuming my feelings once. Then, you used me as a chess piece. In your words, consciously molded me into what you wanted. Li Yunqin looked at him. I can't accept this kind of thing. You should have told me clearly from the beginning. For example, the matter of using Bai Yunqin. You should have told me from the beginning, instead of making decisions for me. Li Chunfeng heaved a sigh. I understand now, but what you did before was because you were too good at acting. Do you still remember? When you were 5 years old, I took you to the full moon cliff to attract the rosy clouds. At the top of the full moon cliff, there was a huge rock that was about to fall. I asked you to climb up and sit on it, and then I asked you if you were afraid. You said you weren't afraid. I asked you why, and you said, I know that Daddy did it for my own good. Li Yunqin tilted his face, as if he wanted to avoid something, and said, it was because I knew that you would be happy if I said that. As long as you were happy, I would have a good life. Li Chunfeng smiled. When you were 9 years old, I told you a story when I was explaining the scriptures to you. It said that there was a young man who followed his master and cultivated for 3 years. One day, when he woke up, he found that his master were no longer there. He was sleeping in an empty field. So he trained alone in the world and suffered a lot. After many years, when he was on the verge of death, his master showed up again. He told him that he had tasted all the suffering in the world and could cultivate the great way. But that person was no longer a young man, but an old man. He was furious. He said that if he was an ordinary person who had never seen the great way, perhaps he would be content with the secular world. But after learning for 3 years and ignoring him, he had lost interest in the world. He searched for his whole life, but to no avail. When he was about to die, his master showed up again. His heart was filled with resentment, and he didn't want to cultivate anymore. I asked you what you thought, and you said that person had entered the devil's path and walked the evil path. You also said that only after suffering can happiness come. That person didn't understand his master's painstaking efforts. He was a piece of rotten wood. There was no pity in throwing him away. Li Yunqin turned to stare at him. You should know that what I said to you in the past was only for you to hear. I made you happy, and I saved myself a lot of trouble. Now you're saying all this. What are you trying to say? I want to say that I actually regret it. Li Chunfeng sighed. I thought you were like me, the same kind of person as me. Since there was no emotion, I had no scruples when I did things. When you took over Long Jiao and schemed against him, you had no scruples. When I did these things to you, I also had no scruples. I thought you were open-minded and empty in my world, and there would be no hindrance in doing things. and you should be able to understand all this. I just didn't expect you to be more like a human than I thought, a purer human. People in the world always have a lot of constraints in doing things, so they are afraid of the slightest thing. But you have no constraints in your heart, so you can do whatever you want. But this matter. I hope you can restrain your thoughts. He also looked at Li Yunqin. If it's because of your resentment toward me that you don't want to follow my plan, and insist on doing things by yourself, I can tell you that I was wrong before. He stood up from the table and repeated himself. I've done something wrong to you, but you and I made it happen together. But now we have a common goal. This time, I think we shouldn't do anything wrong again. Chapter 824. Li Yunqin turned his face away. Holding the railing, he was silent for a while. He glanced at the pedestrians on the street, and saw all kinds of mortals. There were masters and servants, friends, husband and wife, mother and daughter, father and son. Perhaps every family had a different way of interacting with each other. Some were happy, while others were tormented. However, the ethics of the secular world, and the various conditions necessary for survival still bound them together, forcing them to seek compromise and balance in various relationships. As Li Yunqin watched them come and go, she thought of another phrase, besieging a city. The people outside the siege wanted to walk in, and the people inside the siege wanted to walk out. This phrase was rarely used to describe blood relations. For mortals, they were already in the city from the day they were born. There was no such thing as walking in or not. Only someone with a special background like him would be in the same strange situation, outside the city. Actually, he really wanted to walk in. At least he had tried very hard in the past. He patted the railing lightly, and turned his face away. It's not because of hatred. It's not because of willfulness. It's just that our values are different. I don't mind if you want to kill Jin Peng, but I can't use marriage as a cover. That's my bottom line. For other things, I agree with you asking me to talk to Chen Ying, and I want to do it now. Your apology means nothing to me. He paused. I've gotten over it. Li Chunfeng finally heaved a sigh of relief. Okay. If you don't like that method, we can change it. I just don't want you to put yourself in danger. When you have a head-on conflict with Jin Peng, your safety is the most important thing. Your demonic power comes from the netherworld aura, so you don't have an advantage. Let's think of another way to make sure nothing happens to you. About the past, it's good that you've gotten over it. I just don't want to make any more mistakes. To you and to others. Li Yunqin smiled. I hope so. Then let's talk about Chen Ying. Li Chunfeng activated his divine ability, and the tipsiness on his face immediately disappeared. Before you meet her, I have something to tell you. I have been in contact with her, and I have some idea of her character. This person, her thoughts are not deep. What's scary is her temperament. Li Chunfeng said slowly in a low voice. When you first met her, you'd think she was an innocent woman, lively and cheerful, just like those women in the mortal world, who didn't know the dangers of the world. But in reality, this person is decisive, and has an extremely cold temperament. Whether it was the Shinryu, the Golden Rock, or the people of Shimizu, she used them all. Perhaps she did have some feelings for them in the beginning, such as love and friendship. But once he had no choice but to abandon these feelings, he would not be reluctant to part with them. In the secular world, when people interact with others, they are as warm as fire one day, but fall out the next day. She is similar. Li Yunqin was slightly taken aback. The Chun Zhao that Li Chunfeng mentioned was something he didn't expect. Previously, when he saw the various traces she left in this world, such as those clumsy paintings, he felt that the art saint was a mischievous girl. But after reading the diary she left in the Jade Scroll, his impression changed. He felt that she was mischievous, but also kind and responsible. After learning about Chun Zhao's various affairs from the people of Shimizu, this image became complicated in his heart. But he also knew that this was due to her special social environment in the past. In fact, she was very much like the kind of person who didn't care about sex, who was passionate and heartless. This kind of person might have a messy private life, but when it came to doing business, She would have a certain sense of responsibility and morality. Of course, it referred to the morality of some grand goals. But he didn't expect Li Chuanfeng's evaluation of her was extremely cold temperament. But thinking about it carefully, it didn't contradict the previous impression he had. There were always two sides to a person's work, public and private. It wasn't uncommon to see people who were passionate, responsible, and moral when it came to official matters, but extremely cold and merciless when it came to personal matters. It could even be said that in his previous world, most people who held power were like this. They could cry, hold your hand and say that they couldn't bear to part with you, and then tell you to die. He thought about it. You're saying that Chen Zhao might harm me? I'm just telling you to be careful of this. Li Chunfeng looked at him seriously. Everything we think about now, whether it's yours or mine, is from your point of view, to protect you and then save the world. But to her, you're just someone else. If there's a way to get a better result, I guess she'll sacrifice you without hesitation, just like how she sacrificed Shinryu. I've deduced it a few times. Although I didn't think of a better way than what we've thought of, it's not impossible. She's also a smart person. Don't expose too much information in front of her, such as your personality and preferences. She'll hear about all these things, but when she really sees you, she'll definitely think about it carefully. You have to keep your composure. Li Yunxin thought about it carefully for a while and said, Your suggestion sounds reasonable. Li Chunfeng shook his head and smiled. Now that you're already the Grand Supreme, I don't have any other thoughts. I just want this world not to be destroyed like where I was. Then let's wait. Wait for what? In the past, when I contacted Chen Zhao, she would only reply after a few days, Li Chunfeng said. You have to stay in Shuanghu City for a few more days. I'll stay in this restaurant, but if there's any news, I'll inform you immediately. Do you plan to? I'll stay with you, Meng. Li Yunxin thought for a moment. Forget it. I'm going to buy a house for him anyway, so I'll just buy a new one. Li Chunfeng immediately said, I'll do it. I've traveled the human world these years, and met many people. The Freemasons and Munanju can use it too. It's very convenient. Do you like the house Yu Meng is living in now? Li Yunxin was stunned. The owner of the house is from the Freemasons? Munanju. If you like it, I want him to move out. I won't mistreat him financially. It should not be a difficult decision to make. Li Yunxin hesitated for a full 3 breaths before saying, Okay. Then, he jumped down the building and landed on the street. At that moment he used his magical powers. They saw him leap from the 3rd floor and land lightly on the ground like a falling leaf. They also saw his face, which was inhuman in beauty, and his clothes, which could not be described by the word expensive. But no one was surprised. It was as if he was just an ordinary passerby. At most, someone glanced at him, but a voice in his head quickly told him, It's not a big deal. Li Yunxin walked through the streets and alleys, disappearing from Li Chuanfeng's sight. He turned into another street and walked slowly with the pedestrians. Finally, he saw a father and son and followed them. It was a thin, dark-skinned man in coarse clothes and his child, who was about 5 or 6 years old. When Li Yunxin was 5 or 6, he could already climb high cliffs with Li Chunfeng, but this child was as thin as a matchstick man. His big head was on a thin neck, and he lacked curiosity about the people and things on the street. It wasn't the kind of lack of fear and timidity, but the kind of lifelessness that came from experiencing the torture of life and the hunger in the belly. Just walking and living was exhausting, so he didn't have the energy to be curious. In fact, many people in the world were like this. It seemed that even in this era, in this Shuanghu city, this father and son were not living very well. Li Yunxin was 5 or 6 steps behind them, so he could hear their conversation clearly. The man took the child's hand and whispered to him. What he said was, When we go to your granduncle's house, call someone first. If you call someone, stay on the side and don't touch anything. If someone gives you food, don't eat it. If someone asks you if you're hungry, say you're not. When you ask your mother, you say that your mother is sick, and that you want to borrow money for her to see a doctor or something like that. The child responded weakly. The man turned to look at him, then picked him up and walked away. But after walking for a while his forehead was sweating. In this chilly spring season, Li Yunqing could see that his heart was beating very fast, and his arms were trembling slightly, as if he was carrying something heavy. In fact, the child was so skinny that he probably weighed less than 20 kilograms. It seemed that the man was also very weak and hungry. After walking for a few dozen steps, they turned again and entered an alley. The first house in the alley had a black lacquered wooden door, with 2 pairs of small stone lions in front of it. The house was not as big as the one Yu Meng lived in, but it still looked rich. If it was in the world he came from, this family would be living near the business circle of the first ring road. The man didn't put the child down, but held him and knocked on the door. The door opened, and a servant in green poked his head out to take a look. His expression didn't change, and he only said politely, "Granduncle is here? I'll go and inform him." Then he looked at the child in the man's arms and said, "Young master has grown up again." Then he welcomed the 2 into the door, and asked them to sit by the door and wait. Li Yunqing followed them in. The man glanced at him, and the servant also glanced at him, but they didn't say anything, as if he didn't exist, as if he was a stone or a piece of wood. While waiting, the man didn't put the child down. After about half an hour, the servant came back and said, "Master isn't here, and Madam can't see guests. Granduncle, if you have anything to say, you can tell me. Master is back, I'll report back." But Li Yunqing knew that after the servant went to the back of the house, it was also very convenient for Madam to see guests when Master wasn't here. The original words of those 2 were, "Give them 3 taels of silver and send them away. It's annoying to see them." From the beginning to the end, even when waiting, the man's expression was wooden. It was completely different from when he ordered the child on the street. He just held his son tightly in his arms. Li Yunqing stared at him, as if he wanted to see something from his face. Li Chunfeng also held him when he was a child. He couldn't remember that feeling clearly, but he didn't hate it at that time, nor did he like it. Because whether it was at that time or later, they weren't real father and child. It would be hard for an intellectual adult to feel held by another adult. But when the child grew up and thought about this moment, desperate to go to a relative's house with his father to borrow money for his mother's medical treatment, but he was left hanging in the gatehouse, and his father was worried that he would be tired. So he kept holding him. Would he really be touched and feel that this was rare fatherly love? This man was good to this child, and ordinary people were good to children, so he didn't care or have any ulterior motives. That should be pure love. After the servant said these words, the man panicked a little. So he said, "Ahuan is sick again. I went to see a doctor before the new year, and he said he would gradually get better after the winter. Now the winter is over, but I still can't get up, so I want to get some medicine for Ahuan." Hearing this, the servant carefully asked about Ahuan's illness. After asking, he thought for a while and asked the child again. The child did as his father asked and stammered. Only then did the manservant feel around his chest. He took out an ingot of silver. He said, "I guess that Master Gu had some difficulties, so I talked to Sister Yu and got a tael of silver from her. When Master returns, I'll go and tell him." She handed the silver to the man. The man didn't think it was too little. He didn't know that the owner of the house had originally given him 3 taels of silver. He thanked him profusely and left with the child. Li Yunqing stared at the manservant for a while and narrowed his eyes. But in the end, she did nothing but follow the man out. However, there was already a clone left in the gatehouse, following the green-clothed servant. The man carried the child out of the alley and put the child down. Holding his hand, she walked to the front of a bakery. He exchanged 1 tael of silver for 100 copper coins, and spent 5 copper coins to buy 10 pancakes and a bowl of soup pancakes. He asked for an extra bowl, and made 2 bowls of soup cakes. Squatting with the child outside the shop to eat, the child was full after eating half a bowl, and the man ate 3 more pancakes. Then he gave the remaining 7 pancakes to the child, and told him to take them home. The child ran away with the pancakes in his arms. The man got up and burped. The dull expression on his face disappeared. He walked 2 more streets, and turned into the victorious gambling square. In layman's terms, it was a casino. Li Yunxin stood in front of the casino and watched the people coming and going for a while. Those who walked past him felt an inexplicable chill. It was a chill like a bone-piercing north wind. The expressions of several Jianghu people in the casino changed. They touched their weapons, but they didn't know where they felt a murderous aura. But the murderous aura quickly disappeared. Li Yunxin's figure was no longer in front of the casino. The original body returned to the clone. He appeared next to the green-clothed servant. The original body and the clone felt different people and things at the same time, experienced different emotions, but could harmoniously adapt to each other and be digested. This feeling was very strange. Perhaps people who could draw a circle with their left hand and draw a square with their right hand could slightly experience a similar feeling. Just as the man left with the child, ate the pancakes, walked a few more streets and turned into the casino, the servant also did a few things. First, he asked for leave from the sister Yu, or he mentioned to the man before. You should be a maid of a higher class. At that time, she was reading with the young master of that family. She occasionally gave the seemingly dull young master some words and poems. She didn't have time to ask for details, so she agreed. Then the servant changed into casual clothes and walked out from the back door. After walking through 3 alleys, he went to a medicinal soup shop and bought 6 sets of heat-clearing medicine. It cost him 3 taels of silver. Then he went into another shop and ordered a small portion of cooked lamb and 20 boiled eggs, which cost him 16 copper coins. Li Yunxin followed him and looked at him silently, his eyes uncertain. Finally, it took the servant an hour to reach the south side of Shuanghu City. This area was different from the previous streets and alleys. The road was muddy and dirty, full of filth. The houses were also low and dilapidated. Many of them were just straw huts. He entered a thatched house with a small courtyard. It looked like it hadn't been cleaned for a long time. At this time, the child hadn't arrived home yet. There was a woman lying on the bed in the house. Her hair was disheveled and her face dirty, but it could be seen that she was in her 20s and had some beauty in the past. The servant entered the door. The woman looked at him from the Kong, but didn't say anything. So the servant started a fire to boil the medicine, but he didn't have any firewood. So he went to a shop 2 streets away to buy firewood and carried it back. While the medicine was boiling, he sat by the Kong and peeled an egg for the woman to eat. The woman stared at him for a long time, then opened her mouth and ate it. Then he tore the lamb for her to eat. Both of them were silent. Li Yunxin, who was standing next to them, was also silent. After eating, the woman cried while eating. The servant also cried. Then he hugged his head and cried bitterly. When they cried bitterly, their words were broken and unclear. But Li Yunxin heard them clearly. The woman was the daughter of a distant relative of the master of the servant's family. Because her family was gone, she came here to seek shelter. After that, she fell in love with the servant for a long time. When she was 4 months old, the truth came out. She was beaten, scolded, and questioned, but she didn't say who the adulterer was. So one night, she was randomly married off. Li Yunxin watched them cry. When they cried enough, the servant said, "If he comes back to ask, tell him that the master was worried and sent me to see him." Then he hurriedly left. Only then did Li Yunxin let out a sigh of relief and slowly sat down on the edge of the Kong. After sitting like that for a quarter of an hour, he raised his hand and touched the woman's forehead. She quickly felt strength in her body and no longer felt pain. Then Li Yunxin walked out of the door and saw that the child had just returned. Holding 7 pieces of flatbread, he happily ran into the door and gave them to the woman. So the woman took the rest of the lamb and peeled 2 eggs for the child to eat. When the child was full, he ran into the courtyard to play. When the woman felt strength in her body, she also got out of the Kong. She walked around, looked around, and began to tidy up the house and the courtyard. Li Yunxin sat on the low wall of the small courtyard and watched the child play. Slowly he frowned. He began to ask himself a question. Would the man who entered the gambling house feel guilty to this child one day and confess to him out of conscience? Would a gambling addict who used a child to beg for money have a conscience? If he had a conscience, why would he do such a thing? And Li Chunfeng, today, Li Chunfeng acted like a remorseful and compassionate father. Why would he do such things in the past? This was not like him. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.